You know what that number was? All right. Hey, we are live Tuesday night because of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So Tuesday night here, 7 o'clock. We got a huge special guest tonight, Justin Claar. So you want to definitely stay on and watch this. In my eyes, one of the best anglers in the country. And hopefully you can get some value tonight from any questions you have. And hopefully we kind of dig into Justin and kind of see what tips and tricks he might give us and kind of give a little bit of background about him and how long he's been fishing and what he's been doing in the sport. So one thing for sure, like I said today, if he's fishing a tournament, the same tournament you're in, you better watch out. So we're going to play a quick video from our presenting sponsor. But first, I want to take a moment of silence for Lacey Sharp that had passed away this weekend. Terrible tragedy. So I'm going to post a picture and take a moment of silence. So terrible tragedy, losing Lacey. She followed the trail last year and became great friends with Liz and I. And she has very passionate about the sport, and we'll truly miss her. So I'm going to play a quick video from our presenting sponsor, Sea Arc Boats, and then we'll bring Justin in and get tonight rolling.
The Dynasty 2.0 was designed for the serious trophy cat angler and is most often used for tournament fishing. A major key to having a true catfishing boat is its ability to keep the large fish alive so that they can be released back into the water just as healthy as when they were caught. The 2.0's unique design includes a 115-gallon live well that is equipped with an 800 and 1600 gallon per hour fresh water pump. This keeps the contaminated water filtered out and the fresh water coming in. The enormous live well gives plenty of room so that the fish don't get beat around on long boat rides. The Euro-style transom allows for easy access in and out of the boat and is tall enough to deflect large waves that can sometimes arise without much notice. This transom is constructed from 3/16-inch aluminum for added strength. The easy access 3-door battery compartment has plenty of room for batteries, battery chargers, power pole pumps, and additional storage. Rod storage is not a problem. The center rod box is 8 feet long and can hold over 15 rods and reels. The self-bailing bow deck sheds water out of the boat instead of back in the boat when throwing a casting net. The casting area is constructed from tread plate to help eliminate slippage. The bow is also taller than the previous model to combat rough water rides. All of this in combination with the proven 15-degree V-hull, an added reverse chine for more lift, heavy-duty 125-gauge construction, Seatco Air Ride captain and passenger seats, and a durable walk-through windshield makes this boat the most popular in catfishing.
All right. So like I said, we got a special guest tonight. If you have any questions, catfishing related, twisted cat related, really anything, ask in the comments. If you can hear us good, give us some thumbs up and share on your page. Get some people in this. It's going to be a fun night. Let's go ahead and bring Justin in. All right. How we doing?
Not too bad. How are you?
Good. Usually we do this on Monday night, but with New Year's and the tournament and all that, like I just actually got back in town about 2 hours ago. So, yeah. So thanks for accepting the invite to be on the show, and great job this weekend.
Thank you.
Actually, I've got the paperwork here. Everybody that was on the show last week, we all guessed on Lake of the Ozarks what the weights were going to be. Liz guessed 39.23 big fish and total weight 87.14. I guessed 46.18 big fish and total weight 89.20. So I was close, somewhat close. But
Yeah.
Donald and Alyssa Moore guessed, and they were 2.33 away from total weight, and Russell Michaels was 2.34. So total weight, which actually Justin, it's on here, had 94.02, which is an incredible weight at Lake of the Ozarks for having 2 overs, 3 unders, and then also big fish of 44.64. We had three big fish over 40 pounds. We had a 44.64. Kayla McAdams with a 43.44, and JT Ray with a 40.63. So big weights. We had 39 teams away out of 46, and we had a total weight weighed of 1,189.03. So 107 anglers, and then we had 2 grassroots teams. So Alyssa and Donna Moore already got their free hat this weekend because they were still there. But yeah, so I guess let's start. Give me your thoughts of the Lake of the Ozarks and maybe a little bit of background. So have you fished it before? A bunch? What day did you come in? What were your thoughts of the event coming in?
I came in Wednesday evening. I have fished down there as of Wednesday evening. That was like my 5th or 6th day of ever being on the Ozarks fishing in the wintertime. I've fished it just a handful of times. Really actually tried to fish it. This time, this was the first tournament I've ever done on the Ozarks, and I really tried to fish this one. There was in the past I haven't. There's also my best days of fishing on the Ozarks I've ever had were this weekend. So,
And what do you think led to that? I mean, obviously the weather coming up. We had, I think, snow and rain on Thursday. Friday was not much better. Saturday was going to be the best day with almost 50 degrees. Then Sunday drop again.
see, and Friday was my best day. Friday we caught a lot of fish, and even on Thursday we caught a lot of fish. It took us all day, and we finally found a spot. We pulled in there and caught a lot of fish, and no, we didn't catch a single over in that spot, but I felt like it was a spot that you could have. But we fished it for a long time, hoping to see an over and try to get a game plan. We pretty much we fished like our spot we went to first on tournament day. We fished it on Friday. We pulled in there. It just looked good. Pulled in there. We anchored up, and at one point in time, within the first 25 to 30 minutes of sitting there, we had 5 fish on at one time, and one of them wasn't over. And when we got that one in, we were still had rods out, and we were getting fish on at the same time. And once we got those in, we were like, okay, well, we're gonna leave this spot alone. We'll come back here tomorrow. And it
So you
worked.
marked those fish though before you set up on them.
Yeah, we marked a bunch of fish in there. I noticed that, a lot of fish were hard to see because they were, when we would catch a fish, it'd be completely covered in mud from head to the tail. And, because they've been laying in the mud, probably due to the weather conditions, and they hadn't been moving around that much to be that covered in mud. I mean, they were covered in mud. And so that's what we were keying in on was mud the whole time.
And that was deep. Were you deeper in a deeper area or shallow, or because it was cloudy that day probably that you were out, so you didn't have much sun.
Yeah, no, we were in 15 to 20 foot, 15 to 20 foot of water. And I did go down there the week before and fish for a day. I got rained out from work and I drove down there. I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and drove down there and fished for the day, and then I came home. And I was catching fish that day in like 6 foot of water. But I didn't catch a lot, but I did catch a nice over that day.
Now, but that was also probably warmer weather when you would have went
Yeah, it
down
was.
the week before. So do you think, because typically you think sun, lakes, winter, if the sun's up, it's shallow water. But with the way the temperature, if you're looking previous, we got warmer temperatures going into the tournament. They're going to drop even with some snow and stuff. So is that what made you go to a little bit deeper, that 15, 20 foot?
Yeah, I mean, we tried I think a lot of it really had to do with the fact that I tried the shallow just to try it the week before, because I wanted to kind of see if that's where I wanted to start this time, and and so we went up shallow, right off the bat on Thursday this week and didn't catch anything. So we just started working our way out and then really went and, went where we were marking fish. I mean, if we weren't marking fish, we just keep moving. And like we did fish spots that we didn't mark fish, but we also didn't catch anything there either. So um, it really just marking the fish, scanning in, like we'd start deep and scan in shallow and we'd scan until we just quit scanning fish. And then when we'd say, okay, this is about where we saw the most fish, we'd pull back in and anchor up right there where we saw the most fish or the biggest fish. Like if there's a cluster of 2 or 3 that looked like they were considerably larger than the rest of them, then obviously those are the ones we want to target.
When you started, what made you focus on that? So, because obviously Lake of the Ozarks is a massive lake. So you got a couple public ramps. Did you look at a map and say, okay, because of the conditions, I'm going to focus on this arm or this side of the lake? Like, how do you start that? I mean, obviously, are you starting at home on a map and then taking it to the water?
Yeah, definitely start at home on a map, and I look at all the ledges and see where I think there will be mud flats, because there's a lot of places out there that you think is going to be a mud flat, and you get out there and it's all rock.
Oh, yeah.
So, but like when I went down there the week before, I started in Gravois Arm, and I fished around there, and I didn't catch a single fish in the Gravois Arm. And I left, and I started fishing my way up the river, and I went up to mile marker 40, I think. I think I went all the way to 40 that day, and just fished everything I thought I wanted to fish. And at the time, Truman was letting water out, so I was trying to treat it kind of like a river at the same time, where fish might want to get just right out of the current.
Yeah.
And that really didn't work out for me. And then finally, when I finally caught fish that week before, I was just, I finally went up shallow in the right couple coves and caught some fish. I don't know if the fish just were off everywhere else or what.
So do you typically, so this tournament or usually what you do, are you suspended anchoring? Do you ever drag? What made you not drag, or are you not a dragger, or what's your
I
thoughts
like
there?
like at Milford, I love to drag boards out there. And other lakes I would like to drag boards, but out there I don't like dragging. I didn't want to drag boards for the simple fact that we do catch a lot of unders out there. And I I've had a lot of fish where they get hooked up on a board and they're really small, and you sit there and drag them forever and you don't know they're on there. And I just felt like we could do better by being able to just literally from the tip of our rod to the fish. And I mean, we could have pulled and just pulled straight behind the boat as long as you were staying, in the fish 100%. I don't know. I just felt like anchoring. And the water temperature below 50 is pretty much an anchor bite for me. I don't like dragging boards at 0.2 miles an hour. I'd rather drag them like 0.4 to 2 miles an hour.
Yeah. How are they hitting through the
Oh, they
last, through
smash
the
it.
couple days?
They smash it. Um, every over we caught or every slot fish, I mean, they just straight fold rod over. And even the small fish, if they were sitting there pecking at it for quite a while, eventually they would just go nuts on it, and that's when they were hooked up. But or that's when they would get hooked up. Um, but the bite wasn't what I would consider really, really slow or anything. I thought the bite was pretty on.
Yeah, and it's that's what's fun about tournaments is like I always say you could go out that if somebody went out Saturday to fun fish and they didn't catch any fish, they would just think that well it was terrible that day. But somebody's always going to have a good day. So, obviously you figured them out, put on a clinic because that's some big weights. I mean, especially at Lake of the Ozarks, I think it's kind of an untapped fishery when it comes to the low end or the big end of the lake because a lot of the months you can't even get a boat on there. There's too many
Right.
pleasure boats, but I think more people are kind of understanding it. But you always have like when you bring in a bunch of anglers from all over the country, you've got guys that are going to drag no matter what, anchor no matter what, and a little bit in between. So I think second place JT was dragging from what I remember him saying.
He
So
was he was he was dragging boards right across in front of me.
so then you guys were in the same area. So that's what JT said. I know where you were fishing.
It was so crazy because I pulled in there pre-fishing the day before, and I couldn't see him, and I pulled in and anchored. We did that really good. We had the 5 fish on. We had to over, and we were like, okay, let's get out of here. As we're pulling out, we're like, well, there's another spot right around here. Let's go check it out. And as we pull out and go around, we see him dragging boards right there, and I'm like, and he caught a fish right there. I'm like, well, he knows there's fish here, and then
Yeah.
sure enough, he did really good. He caught a lot of fish.
You got to watch him catch those fish.
Yeah, I did. And he caught he caught more fish than I did. I just happened to catch the right fish, I guess.
How many overs did you catch? Would you say?
Uh, during the tournament, I think 4 or 5, and we missed one right off the bat that we're like 100% positive wasn't over. I mean, it just absolutely annihilated the rod. Just didn't have the bait right in his mouth.
So big baits, small baits, or
Uh, we ran pretty much just, I guess we would say a medium bait. We were running, taking 8-inch shad, 8 to 9 inch shad, and we would cut the head and the gut pocket off of it and use the head and the gut pocket. And the head, we weren't cutting it off right behind the head. We were leaving some gut pocket on there, so it was a little bigger. When I wanted to catch better unders, I put some small baits on, and we didn't catch better unders. I just caught smaller fish. Our channel cat really helped us out on that one, I thought.
yeah. So that's for those of you watching. I think you would have still been fine without it, but you can weigh 2 overs and 3 unders and none in the slot, obviously, which is 26 to 34 inches. But Justin had 2 overs, 2 unders, and then a channel cat that probably helped you a couple pounds, maybe.
Yeah.
So the channel cat and flatheads are not in the slot. So actually, I think if I remember, there are 3 or 4 teams that had help. You being one of them, Spatafor and Saunders. I can't remember the
Yeah, they
other
had
2. But
Saunders
they
had
had
the
like either a
flathead.
flathead or a channel cat that was just a little bit bigger than a slot fish that helped them. But you had 2 good fish. Obviously, the 44 was a huge help. So, but there's a lot of fish in that lake. You know what I mean? And I think once you get on them, obviously you and JT were on them hardcore, so that's got to be fun when you're out there and you really figure them out like that.
Oh yeah, I mean we got a lot of fish. I mean we had a really good time. I mean that's all I really like to catch a lot of fish. So but I think most fishermen do, you want to go out and you want to catch as many fish as you can, all the time, and as big a fish as you can. And when we were having days like that, I mean, they're just a blast.
100%. What was your thoughts when you could see JT catching fish? I mean, you could probably see him catching some decent fish too.
Yeah. And at one point in time, we had left and moved out of there because our bite slowed down so much. And we're like, you know what? Let's give this a little while and see if some other fish move in here. We'll go see if we can get on some fish that want to bite right now. And so as we were moving out, there was a planer board out there, and that was floating in. As we were coming back in, there was a planer board floating in to where we were headed to, and I didn't really want him pulling in right over the top of me to get his planer board. So I grabbed his planer board and ran out and dropped it off in front of him and asked him if he was doing any good. He said, "Oh, yeah, I got a couple overs." I'm like, "Oh man!" And I knew, I already knew what type of fish were there, so I was like, "Man, this could be tough."
So do you think that the weigh-in would be there'd be some good boats? I mean, some good fish caught.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm especially. I knew, we weren't on the only fish in the lake. We were just on a small stretch that had a lot of fish in it.
Yeah.
And like you say, that lake is so big, so you get, if they're not just completely scattered, you're going to have a pocket of fish here and a pocket of fish there, and even I think a lot of guys that were in the tournament caught a lot of fish that just didn't catch an over or catch the ride over. Sound like a lot of people caught a lot of fish. I mean, everybody weighing in fish, and there wasn't very many of those boats that didn't have a full limit of fish.
Yeah. So when you got there and you found those fish, I mean, do you think because I talked to Ryan Casey today on my drive, and we were talking about the Mississippi River and how something I've noticed in the last couple of years is when I go pre-fish, I do a lot of scanning. If I scan, I'll try to look for a pot of fish, as everybody calls it. And then once you find them, you maybe see if they're going to bite, and, I'll catch one and leave. And on the Mississippi River, talking to Ryan, we say they move a lot. So you might, on Friday morning, you might find a nice load of fish on a bank, and then Saturday morning, they're gone. They might not go far, whether they go to the other side of the river, or they go down a few miles or up, but they move a lot. Do you notice that at Lake of the Ozarks? Do you think they move as much as they do on a river?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. I don't see why they wouldn't either. I mean, everything's, especially because that continuously changes. You've got, when they shut Truman off, boom, you have no current in that lake. And then
Do you know
as soon
what
as
day they
open
did that?
Truman up, it was open. Let's see here. So it was open. I think they opened it back up again Wednesday or Thursday last week for a little bit. And then, but they didn't open it. I don't think they opened it up as much as they were the week before, but it had some flow through it.
Yeah,
I
because I
don't know
know
what
some
day.
anglers that went down there and pre-fished a week or two out and did really well, but I think Truman was running water. The water temp was different. You know what I mean? Because with the water temp at that 50, the bait was all over the place. So I went down there at one point and found bait in 20 foot of water. And then this weekend, I heard guys saying that there was a lot of the bait that was 40, 45, 50 feet that they had to throw these long tape nets. So obviously, if the bait changes, the fish change, and you got to really stay on top of that.
I think that, a lot of that also, the bait I was catching was in 2 to 6 foot of water. And then I did catch some bait in about 14 or 15 foot of water. I think that helped me too. Finding bait, finding different areas that had bait. Like where we were fishing, where JT was fishing, there was balls of shad from out where he was fishing all the way up into where I was fishing. And they weren't big balls of shad, but they were balls of shad. There was food.
So obviously a food source close to those fish.
Right. Oh yeah. And I think that's a big key that a lot of people overlook is bait. Blue cats especially, they're gluttonous. They'll eat everything. So will a flathead if he gets a chance. And I think a lot of people see a bunch of bait, but they don't see any big fish, and they don't fish an area because they don't see a big fish. And sometimes that big fish, he's just hiding.
Yeah, he's among there. You just got to find him.
Right. And you're talking about, pre-fishing, scanning, and doing all that. Down there, I pre-fish more than I normally do. Like normally, if I catch a fish or two, I'll be like, okay, there's fish here. Especially like on the Missouri River. If I'm catching fish in an area that I like, that I think can hold a big fish, I don't care if I catch a big fish there. If I catch a 10-pounder, I'll probably back out of it and leave it alone. So I don't catch big fish that's sitting in there that, a week from now, I think they move around a lot, but every once in a while I feel like sometimes a fish just likes his home.
Oh yeah. So the morning of the tournament, when you left, did you could leave at 6, start fishing at 7. Did you leave and get to your spot early enough, like where you could scan it, or you just like knew I'm gonna go here? The fish were here the last 2 days, like, or do you use a little bit of time to scan?
I would have if I had allotted myself time to do so. I didn't. I cruised up there at like 30 miles an hour for most of it, and then I took off when I felt like I needed to hurry up and get there. And we pulled in there at 6:58, and we threw anchor and dropped the talon and cast, because we were actually anchored in. We were anchored right off of a ledge, but where all of our baits were in 15 to 20 foot of water on mud.
So on a spot like that, are you throwing an anchor like on shore or as close as you can, and then kind of so you just don't want your back end to sway much, because people always talk about that, like what do you do to keep the back of the boat swaying back and forth, or does that affect the bite?
It doesn't. If the fish are actually active, it doesn't affect them too much. I mean, I spot locked out in my trolling motor is the original Ulterra. So it had the very first GPS in it that Minn Kota had on there with spot lock. And my boat, I could cast out and cast a long ways to where my line should be, pointing a long ways out away from the boat. And my boat will push all the way back to where the lines were about to come up underneath the boat. And I was really having to watch them because I thought they were going to end up around the prop. And then the boat would take back off and go up there. And then, of course, it sways side to side, just like that too, and does all sorts of stuff. And fish still, we caught fish out there doing that too. Later in the day, we moved out in a little bit deeper water and tried that. And we caught quite a few fish doing that. The line would go slack and then it'd go tight because the boat would be over here and then it'd come back over there.
Yep.
I think a lot of people worry about it a little too much. But if the bite was really, really, really slow and they were biting really soft, I could see how it would hurt you. And so obviously having 2 anchors, if you're in deep water, if you could throw one anchor up on a ledge somewhere or if you got enough rope to where you can just go out and anchor one way off the front and one way off the back. And slow that down a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of people actually this weekend they were talking about like having power pulls with the paddles on it, like if there's even wind, just to get that current so your boat's not all over the place. So, it's with
Mm-hmm.
new products that come out over the years, whether it's anchors or power poles or talons or whatever to keep your boat, because that can be a pain, especially if you are spot locked or anchored and your boat's almost doing circles. The wind can really mess with you. So
Oh yeah, I can be ruthless. Sometimes it's worse when there's less wind because it
yeah,
swirls a lot more. A straight line wind, you can keep the boat, at least the nose is pointing in the same direction pretty much all the time. It's pointing easterly,
yeah.
it's not spinning in full
So
circles.
another thing we were talking about, me and Justin were kind of backstage for a little bit, and I've been watching you for years now. So this is my 10th full year of running Twisted Cat Outdoors, and you've been fishing probably at least that I've known most of those. I remember the big River Cat tournament down in Caruthersville that you were at, and a lot of events. And I made the post on my personal page today that you don't want to miss this show. And Jason Clark, made some funny stuff, and he said. Um, I never heard of him. And then I said, well, what's the last tournament you fished? And he said, MRM Helena. And I said, well, Justin got fifth and took some of your money there. So that's why, like I said, there's so many people that are great in the sport. And I always, in my mind, have who I think are some of the top anglers. And in my mind, like with Twisted Cat, I always try to make the trail tough, as in it's not just a Mississippi River or a Missouri River, it's kind of all over. So to be the best, you can be really good on one river or one lake, but when you can start taking it from the Mississippi, the Ohio, Lake of the Ozark, the Missouri, that to me is a good angler. And most of those anglers are starting to kind of come to light, like you've been doing this a long time. So I know what you've done on the Missouri, the Mississippi, Lake of the Ozarks, and that's not easy to do, to travel and do that. So, to me, you're one of the best. And
Thank you.
I guess kind of go into maybe how you got started in this, and maybe some of the
And
things that you've learned over the years to become one of the best.
and tournament fishing. When did I start tournament fishing, or just fishing for cats
When
in
did you
general?
start fishing just in general? Like what got you into the sport?
Oh man, I've been fishing since I was a little kid, and I bass fished a lot. I bass fished a lot, and then I moved out to Western Kansas. Kind of took that away from me. There was not a whole lot to fish out there, and but we catfished a lot. Like in high school, my tournament partner Cody Lovall that I fished with a lot. Um, him and I in high school. Uh, we met junior year of high school, and him and I would take. He had an old '57 Featherlight fiberglass ski boat, you know, um, and we would go out to local lake here, Hillsdale, and I look over here because it's literally like a half mile from my
Yeah.
driveway, um, and we would go out there and stay the night out there and flathead fish, and then drive to school in the morning, and we would stay in the boat all night, and so we got we we never were that successful rod and reel out there, but we caught a lot on limb lines out there. We caught some big fish, um, limb lines and trot lines, but it was helping us learn like where the fish were at, even. And then after high school, moving away and then coming back, a buddy of mine was going, and I'd been doing some catfishing. A buddy of mine was going down to local lake here and asked me if I wanted to go, and I went and had one of the best nights of fishing I've ever had. Still to this day, we caught like somewhere around 50 or 60 flatheads that night. I caught a 65.
Wow.
We had one more in the 50s, 2 or 3 in the 40s. Just an absolute amazing, incredible night of fishing, and never been able to top it since. I fished that spot numerous times. It was the night before Mother's Day, and we stayed out there till the sun came up because it never stopped. And from that point on, I was absolutely addicted, and I am addicted. I immediately went and got a boat. It was an old Richline boat, 16-foot Richline with an 18 horse Evinrude on it, and full start, of course. And started fishing, started drifting that lake for blue cats. Started fishing for flatheads again out here at Hillsdale, and started really doing a lot. Went down to Stockton Lake and tried flatheads down there. And then I upgraded a boat. And then, you do that a couple times and get to where you kind of want to be with a big live well and all the things.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't
So
know.
what was your first couple tournaments, and then how did you get kind of into those and start traveling? And
My ex-girlfriend's stepbrother asked me if I wanted to go fish a Waverly tournament. It was a Casey catfish tournament when Brad Kilpatrick ran it.
yeah,
And we went out there to Waverly, and I can't remember what place I got, but I remember it's funny. I remember beating John Jameson, and I was like, he's supposed to be the best. And my
I hope he's watching.
I hope he is. I was like, and my buddy that I fished with and caught all those flatheads with, he worked at Bass Pro and had read every Catfish Insider and had verbatim, word for word, told me everything that John ever said in those. And and so, I'd never met John or anything like that. I just knew the name from him, from my buddy, had and printed the name in my brain. And we went out, and I did better than him. And I was like, well, this is awesome. I'm going to do this again. It's like, if I can do better than him, I know there's a lot of luck involved. That was the first night I ever fished the river. First night I'd ever even put a boat on the river. And that really hooked me into the tournament fishing. I mean, big time.
Yeah.
After that, I think I did a tournament every weekend or every other weekend all summer for about 3 years. And then I slowed down a little bit, but I still go do a lot of big ones. Try to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you keep track of the total money, and for those of you watching, you can kind of see up above on the screen, you can see some of his plaques. But like I said, Justin is really good. If you go through his profile, you can see a lot of even videos of you weighing some fish and pulling some big fish out. And another thing we talked about that, as an angler that I want to always be, and then what I see as a tournament director is, just like we talked about, you can't win every tournament. You know what I mean? Because there's always going to be some luck involved too. But the goal is to be consistent. So like my goal is always to finish in that top 10. Like if you can finish in the top 10 consistently, that is really good. You know what I mean? That's that John Jameson mentality where, you're always in the top. But you have your days. You know what I mean? John and Kevin had a rough Lake of the Ozarks tournament to start the season off, but usually you're looking out for those guys. You know what I mean? There's a select few anglers that you always got to watch.
Heck
And
yeah.
that's what you got to be careful
about. One of the guys I watch out the absolute most for is Caleb McAdams.
100%.
Dude is on
100%.
fire. When he's on fire, he's on fire.
Yeah, I mean he's got my record in 10 years of, I think, I think his was 106 that he weighed. So I've only weighed 2 over 100, and he was one just last year in Alton.
Yep.
There's so many good anglers, and you take even the Lake of the Ozarks tournament, just like you said, you had, there were a lot of anglers out there, but you won the tournament. And even for some of you that are new into this sport, you can go say, like, I sat down with Gilbert. Gilbert and Christy were just, they got into last year fishing a lot of tournaments. I don't think they've maybe missed only one. And they were kind of joking with us. They went to dinner with us New Year's Eve, and they said, yeah, we beat quite a few people. We beat the Dragon Master team and all that stuff. And like, for them, they're new. And that kind of shows you that everybody has that bad day. I think they beat Kevin and John. And that's something that I know sounds terrible, but you got to be proud of. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, especially when you're new into it, like when you do that and it's your first one, especially the first time you do it, period, you're just like, yes, I did that. I did it. It's great.
But you are consistent. I mean, like I said, last year, every time you're at a tournament, you're cashing a check, it seems like. You know what I mean? You're taking a lot of people's money.
This year was good.
I have to say, this is a good start. Technically, it was 2023, but you got a really good start. I think, I don't know, what did you take home? First place was 50.
50, well, it's 52 or 57
or something.
Yeah.
Probably with big fish, close to $6,000.
Yeah, with big fish, we were right there. Yeah, it's a great start. And that's, like St. Joe this year. We caught, Cody and I only weighed in 4 fish at that tournament and had second place, and they only beat us by 4 pounds. And the only reason we weighed in was because we were a long ways, I'm not going to say how far, from St. Joe. We were a very long ways from St. Joe, and it was a very long boat ride back, and the water temperature was high, and I hadn't had 170 some pounds of fish in my live well yet. Not in that live well, and I didn't. I was feared for those fish, so we went back and fished another area that we normally catch fish in. Couldn't get a bite the rest of the night. It was pretty crazy.
So I I had somebody text me today, and their big thing, because they know you've caught a lot of big fish. They said, "Is there anything that you or tip, like what do you do that catches bigger fish? Like, it seems like a lot of the events that you fish, you always have giant fish. Does it have to do with bait, presentation? You hear a lot of different things from different anglers. Like, what do you think has made you catch a lot of bigger fish? Like finding them on sonar and specifically targeting that fish? Is it the size of bait? What would you say that's helped you?
I think a lot of it is just bait placement. I don't even think a lot of times it matters what you're using for bait. I think as long as you get it in front of the fish, he's going to eat it, unless he's just real finicky that day. But we try to have fresh bait. Structure, look for structure. That's one, big fish like structure, and just keying in on structure. And it can be anything. It could be a pile of rocks. It could be a tree. It could be an old sunken barge. It could be anything. That's one thing a lot of people look past. People look past ledges even that are in the middle of the river. There's ledges out there. Sometimes sometimes it's a big flat, but then you might have a ledge out there in the middle of the river that you just haven't seen it. Or in a lake, same deal. Like lake fishing, if I was pulling planer boards and it was in the middle of summer, I like little underwater points. Anywhere there's a little underwater point, chances are I'm going to put a bait on top of it at some point in time throughout the day.
Yeah.
We do run, we try to run, mainly fresh, not frozen baits.
Have you noticed a difference? I mean, between fresh and frozen?
Mm, on the Mississippi River, fresh skipjack seems to outperform frozen like all the time. On the Missouri River, frozen skipjack, because it's harder to find up here, harder to target. They're in the river, you can catch them, but you got to spend time trying to find them. I know some guys that have found a couple places that have them quite often, but they're not really big all the time. Sometimes I catch, just little bitty ones.
Yeah.
But we honestly, this whole year on the Missouri River, we never used frozen skipjack in a tournament. We used fresh bait.
So what do you, as it's getting harder when not having as many bait dealers being able to do it because fuel prices and they're harder to catch,
And the
what do you do when you
limits.
go to, will you go to get it yourself, or will you make sure, like for a MRM tournament, or you're gonna go to the Mississippi River, like what do you do if there's not bait for sale?
Well, we make sure there's bait for sale.
Yeah.
we um, uh, we've got a couple different bait dealers, that we can go through. One of them is up here out of St. Joe. I can't think of the name of them off the top of my head.
Andy
Yeah.
Andy with AmeriCat
And
Bait. Yeah, he did great for us last year. That's important as a tournament director. A lot of these places, especially, if we're going to New Madrid or Cape or whatever, that, if you get off work and you're in Kansas and you want to come fish that tournament, not having bait or fresh bait is a big deal. So you don't have time if you're getting off work on Friday, you're going to fish that tournament Saturday. You want to be able to come, just get there, get your fresh bait, and then you're ready to rock and roll and not spend time, because I know anglers that'll drive to Alabama to go get bait.
yeah. Oh
And
yeah.
to me, I would rather use frozen bait and go scan for a day than drive to Alabama to get fresh bait. You know what I mean? Because to me, I think it's important to not go out blind, or because there's anglers that you can go out and don't make that transition, and it's 10, 11 o'clock in the morning and you haven't got a bite, you haven't caught a fish. You got to change your game, your whole plan.
Absolutely.
Cody, we're
Absolutely.
coming to Bama to get that bait. Come on, baby.
Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's when we go down there and fish. I mean, that's always my biggest fear though, is that they're not going to get bait caught, or they're not going to have bait for me. And we've caught plenty of fish down there on frozen bait. So it's not that you can't catch fish on the Mississippi River with frozen bait. And it's not that you can't catch big fish down there. It's just we have had better luck with fresh, not frozen. I can see a difference in my results for sure.
So let me ask you this question. And I've since the day I've been getting into this sport, you always hear shad, skipjack, moon eye. You can't use skipjack in the winter. You're only supposed to use shad, in the winter on the Missouri. And you're going to Lake of the Ozarks, they don't have skipjack, or maybe they do a little bit. Like, do you agree that if you're on the Missouri River between October and March, you have to use shad? What's your thoughts on that?
You don't have to use shad, but I prefer it for the most part.
So you think that bite changes where the blue cat on the Missouri River say, okay, it flipped,
Oh,
it's cold water. Do not throw fresh skipjack at me because I want fresh shad.
I've fished with skipjack in the fall and not done as good when I were using shad. And I I think a lot of that really has to do with the fact that I can catch shad here. So since I don't have to buy skipjack to go take out here in the wintertime and fun fish, you know, you could probably catch fish up here on skipjack in the wintertime, but I just, why pay for bait when you can get so much just by
True.
throwing a net once or
Yeah.
twice. And I, catching, you can catch fish on shad in the summertime too. They just deteriorate faster. Seem like, well, I mean, skipjack deteriorate real fast.
Will you ever use frozen shad?
In the wintertime,
Okay.
definitely. Definitely in the wintertime. In the summertime, I won't use frozen shad, not at all. Because it just doesn't hold together as good. And I just don't think the fish like it as much. But in the wintertime, heck, they're eating all the frozen shad kill from up north and out of every lake, anytime that it opens up or we get a rain and a creek that had shad in it and some of them froze, pushes them out in the river. I mean, they're eating that. They're opportunistic.
They are, and I know that, and I'm sure you've watched me the last year talk about a couple guys actually that are pretty new in the sport. I took one of them out 2 years ago for Fishing for Freedom, and he was one that Nate Bardo. If you're watching, I'm not hating on you, but he did a lot of bank fishing, and the first time he really got to catfish in a boat was with me, and we did really well, and I think we had like fresh moon eye and all that stuff. But he had used chicken and soaked it and all that stuff. Well, more and more people are using chicken, and I thought it was literally a joke until New Madrid and Nate and Kirk Lucky, they got their containers, the styrofoam container that had the chicken. They had two of them, and they showed me they were empty, and they caught like 32 fish. Now they got, I don't know, maybe in the top 20, they didn't catch any big fish. So the saying is always, well, if they use shad or skipjack in that same area, would it be the same? But what Kirk said is, he uses chicken, Nate uses skipjack, and whoever after the third fish is caught on whichever, they'll switch. And Nate's never out caught the chicken. So that can always go, is it the angler, is his bait out further and all that? But Kirk Lucky, I'm going to try to have him on here in the next week or two. He uses a lot of chicken. And Kirk, if you're on here, tell me what your big fish is on chicken, because I know it's like over 70, maybe even in the 80s.
Really?
And it's crazy. I mean, this weekend he sent me another picture of chicken.
What if it works for him? Don't
And
knock
that's the
it.
thing, is if it works, you know what I mean? And I'm not. And actually, funny story is I used it in my one-on-one against Brian in the morning, and I'd caught fish the day before, but it's tough because I'm not confident in it. So here is not a good shot, but that's him who's got chicken and shad in that picture. That's again, Kirk, I'm showing your secret. That's chicken and shad. And this was on chicken this was on the Mississippi River last week. So wild.
On chicken. Well,
Chicken.
I had I can't remember what tournament it was in, but I had a fish this year puke up like the triangle sandwich you get at a gas station, like a Landshire brand. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I had one puke up the wrapper from one of those this year in a tournament.
Really?
Yeah. Puked up the whole wrapper. They had, opened it up and taken their sandwich out, and it ended up in a creek, ended up in a river or whatever. And yeah, puked that up in my live well.
I mean, they eat a lot.
Yeah.
They'll eat anything.
If it's in front of his face and it tastes remotely good, it's going to go down the hatch.
Yeah. 100%.
That's why, like, when I say bait placement, like whether you're bumping down the river, your bait placement, boat control is your bait placement, but then also your cadence. Because so like when you're bumping, I don't know how many times Cody and I have been fishing with the exact same bait, and I used to always be way farther out than him. I could be out there like 350, 400 feet, and he'd be back at like 200 feet, just slow bumping it and just catching fish like crazy. And I would try to get down and do the same thing he was doing, and he would catch all the fish all day long. I'd just be the net guy, keep the boat in the right place, and be the net guy. And uh, it's happened to us numerous times where one day one of us is really hot, and one day the other one's really hot, and it's crazy. It's like they need to. Some days they just need to be a little bit more aggressive to get my cadence, what I'm doing when I'm bumping, and then other days it doesn't matter. They just want to eat everything that you put in front of them.
Yeah, and that's funny you say that. So I've fished with a ton of anglers over the years, and Wade Kaminsky always comes to mind when it's, you always hear of anglers saying, well, they got their line counter, they're 380 feet out, or I'm 480 feet out. Well, Wade Kaminsky, I fished with him. I caught more fish than him. Jake Hockey caught more fish, but the big fish were Wade, close to the boat, always. I mean, it's just he had it that day, but Wade's caught a lot of big fish, and I know. Hopefully, Wade. Don't get mad at me if I'm telling a secret, but he likes to stay close to the boat. You know what I mean? So maybe he has that rhythm that those fish like that. How he's presenting his bait.
I prefer to be 175 feet is like bread and butter. But if you throw out, and I'm stubborn sometimes where I'll throw out, and I'm hoping that it's going to stop sometime. So I'll just keep walking until I'm forever out there. And then finally it's like, okay, I gotta reel it up and start over and throw a heavier weight on, or change something up and bring it in a little bit closer. Cause I don't like to be out. I know some guys that like to be out there 400 feet. And
That's a
they
lot of
love
work
it.
when you got to catch that fish and reel it all the way back in.
And then when you get smoked by a big fish, I mean, at least when you're bumping, you can spin the trolling motor around. You can chase fish down, but that's a long ways. It's a long ways to fight a fish in. I've done it a bunch of times, but it's never the most enjoyable part of the whole thing is when bumping is the takedown. I mean, every time.
Oh my gosh. I think once every time an angler gets that, it's just nonstop. I mean, that is what they're all about.
Oh
It's hard
yeah.
to go anchor. It's hard to do a lot of things. And just like John Quinn said, plus getting hung up that far out too. But yeah, I mean, when you get your first bite bumping, like it's hard to go anchor. I mean, it's
Yeah.
so much fun. It's just that adrenaline. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Cody
While
and
we're
I.
talking about bumping, what's your rig? Do you have a certain rod, and like what line is it? Everybody's all over. You hear the 100-pound mono, and some people are using 30-pound mono. So what's your setup?
So like on uh my bumping and lake rods, I run 80-pound braid Power Pro. Um, and then I run 60 Andes for my leader. And the hooks that I'm using right now, I'm using some Eagle Claw 1197s, like 8/0s. I think they're 8s. It might be 9s. I think they're 8s. Um, I was using some Matsus that I got through David Shipman, and I really liked them, but I was losing. I lose. I lose quite a few when you're fishing in structure. You lose quite a few, and I get tired of paying $1 a hook. So I kind of had to
You
get
can
away
lose a
from them.
lot, yeah. And when you're fishing structure, you're gonna lose a lot of stuff. So is that why you
Yeah,
go from 80 braid to 60 mono, so it's easier to break out?
yeah. with my bumping rod or my lake rod, the reels themselves, there's no way a fish is going to hit that and break my leader with 60-pound leader. There's just no way. Not saying that I couldn't thumb him and really put the brakes on him and make him break it. If I really, really wanted to, I mean, you might be able to. I think you're going to burn your fingers before that happens. But then like on my anchor rods, I have a 100-pound Power Pro and I run an 80-pound leader on those. And that's because a lot of times you're casting out in the structure or next to structure, and it's, there's a good chance that the fish is going to come out and run right back into it, or it'll just be hung up down there for a while, and you can normally get your gear back a little bit better. Cody this year, during which tournament? That was Atchison tournament that we won. We pulled up on some brush out in the middle of the river and anchored up in front of it. And he sat there and bumped a bait with an anchor rod. He walked the bait back to the brush. And the fish absolutely annihilated it and went out to the middle of the river. I was like, sweet. I reeled up rods. He reels left-handed. I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I took his rod that had the fish on it. I'm like, I promise I won't lose him. But you got to reel up those other rods because you're way faster than me. And so he reeled up the other two rods his. And I went up and I handed him his rod back and ran up and ditched anchor. And you took the troll motor, went out in the middle of the river, got out in the middle of the river, and the fish turned around, went right back into the cover and got hung up in the trees. And we went back around and drove up. I used the gas motor at this point now. And I went around the brush pile and tried to get the fish to come pull out as we went down and around the backside. And he wouldn't come out. And we drove right up on top of it. And Cody's sitting there pulling up on it. He's not pulling too terribly hard. And all of a sudden, his rod tip just goes boing, like his line snapped. And he looked at me and I'm like, oh my gosh, did we just lose that fish? And all of a sudden he's like, oh no. So he starts reeling. The fish was still there. It had come loose off of a piece of brush the line had. And so it just tinged up. Well, then the fish is still hung up in there, and the fish came out and then swam back into it. And I'm sitting there with the gas motor holding us right over the top of this brush pile. And he just was keeping tension on him, and he's pulling, and all of a sudden a log like 8 foot long and like this big around came floating up his line. And,
wow.
And then that fish finally, after that, I mean, it was a little while after that, the fish finally came out of there, 77 pounds, I think.
Which tournament was that?
Atchison, where we weighed in like 200 and we weighed in
Was that in
207
August?
pounds. Huh?
Was that an August tournament?
Yeah, that was the week or 2 weeks after the St. Joe tournament.
I think I have that video. Let me see if this is it. Just to show everybody watching, like the kind of fish that these guys catch. Let's see if I can do that here. Sure. Is this it?
Yeah.
Ooh, there's a good one. Ooh, there's a I'm gonna let you down in a second. Okay. That's your big fish, gentlemen. Nice blues, boys. Hold on to him, cowboy. gentlemen. Nice fish. Put them both in there. Yeah. Guys, help me get them. I'll put the other two in there. Oh, how big are they?
How big
So,
are
I
they?
mean, yeah, I mean, look at that. So that was August. So you won that tournament. You got fifth at
At the MRM Helena. I had to look up there.
There we go. Okay. So I had some weird music in the background. So you got fifth at MRM Megabucks Helena. You won that tournament. You won the Missouri River Catfish Classic that was over 50 boats kind of spread out. What'd you have there? Tell me that weight.
100 and I think what do we have? Like 100.
It was a lot.
161 or 162 pounds or something like that, or 151.
Yeah.
We
You won this weekend. I mean, that's the Missouri River, Lake of the Ozarks, Mississippi River. You know what I mean? Just in this year, plus some of the other events, because you went to, well, how'd you do at Megabucks in Vicksburg?
I didn't do that one.
You didn't do that one. So that's good
No.
for the people that were fishing it then.
Yeah, sure. I can't wait to go fish down there.
Yeah. It's something different. Like the Mississippi River is a fun fishery, but it seems like the last 2 years for sure, or even last year, a lot more anglers are bumping the Missouri River that you never really heard of that. And now I think that's changed the game. I always say I love the Mississippi River. I've weighed a lot of big fish. I mean, a lot of big fish, over 90s. But the Missouri River, I don't know why. The first 100-pounder 103 I weighed at the Confluence out of Columbia Bottoms, Justin Wolf, and the one I just weighed recently was up by the up the Missouri River past St. Charles, with Caleb. But you hear so many 100+ pound fish get caught on the Missouri River, and I think as more people are fishing, because I think Caleb was bumping when he caught that.
Yeah,
I don't know if he told you.
Yeah, he was.
What's your biggest fish in general?
My biggest fish in general is 80. I just caught this year in that Missouri River Catfish Classic. 89 point something, 89 something.
That's a big
before
fish.
that,
Were you bumping? Or was that an anchor?
That was anchor bite, because that was a more fall. Water temperature was too low to bump. Before that, it was 81, which was a lake fish. And then my best bumping fish so far is 77.
Yeah, that's a giant.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Heck yeah. A big
You
fish.
see a lot of Facebook 77-pound fish, but a true, and I'm not calling anybody out, but a true 77 is an absolute pig.
So that picture you used of me earlier, on that fish was 77. He looks bigger.
Yeah, and I've seen so many fish that were 77, but that's a true 77.
That fish is 77. That was bumping. Yeah.
That's a giant.
That thing was a toad. He burnt both my thumbs. Completely to where they were slick.
So what time of day, what was the water temp? Kind of give us that fish's history there.
That was in the middle of the day. Probably around August 1st. Probably late July or August or early August. And so the water temperature was hot. And when it hit it smoked it all the way across. He went all the way across behind a dike to the inside bend. Then I chased him all the way over there, and then he turned around and swam all the way back out to the outside bend again.
So were you by yourself, or you had somebody help driving the boat?
I had my employee with me, which I still control everything at that point in time.
Which is tough to do when you're trying to fight a fish and you got to move the boat, and that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's, part of it though. I fish a lot by myself though. So I like to go, anytime I can. So you get kind of used to that a little bit. Netting a big fish, that's the fun part by yourself. That's the hard part.
Oh, especially, yeah, you gotta make sure they're wore out, or that's so many things can happen, especially even in a tournament situation where, and obviously you guys that fish the really nasty structure, when that fish hits, you gotta be ready to rock and roll, because if they go into structure, you're very lucky to get that fish out.
Oh yeah, very lucky. The fact that Cody's fish got that one I was talking about earlier came out of there, 9 times out of 10 that fish would have never came out of there.
True.
Maybe more than that. But we were lucky. We were very lucky to get that fish out. But we were just slow and persistent with it, and it worked out. I think a lot of times when people get fish that go get hung up, that the fish goes and gets hung up in structure, they give up too fast. They get frustrated. They start pulling on their rod too much, and they really get the fish where he obviously is very uncomfortable and he wants to stay in there and never come out. I think a lot of times, like I've done in the wintertime, had a fish, and I've done it in the summertime too, I guess, where a fish on anchor swam into a tree and I couldn't get him to pull out of there. So I just set the rod in the rod holder and let it sit in the rod holder for 20, 30 minutes. And all of a sudden, the fish swims out of there. And all of a sudden, my rod's bouncing again. And I catch the fish and pull him in.
That's that's good. That's a
So I
good
think
deal.
a lot of times I think they'll swim back out of there. They've, after a while, that pressure on them, at some point in time, they got to give into it sometime. As long as he's not, down there just completely wrapped around something. But if he just swam in and like tucked into something, tried to tuck into some tight spot, at some point in time, he's going to back out of there. Hopefully.
So Justin Clark says, what tips do you have for a beginner on learning to read a graph, how to spot the right fish? So I guess maybe kind of reiterate that, let's say you're going to go to a body of water. Let's just say that you haven't fished Lake of the Ozarks and you're going to go, or like our next event's in Grand Lake of the Cherokees, and you've not fished it. So you're obviously, explain how that goes down. Like you're going to start doing some research at lunch or at night. You're going to pull up the maps and maybe on your phone on Navionics and search it. And then once you get there, what do you do? Like what graph do you use? Do you use side scan? Kind of give us that, how you're looking around for stuff.
I'm using like chirp and side scan. Mostly look at a lot of stuff with side scan, try to find some type of structure, obviously, whether it be a ledge or a big brush pile or whatever. But then I also really, like we were talking about bait earlier, try to really, really key in on areas that have a lot of bait, because a lot of bait normally means there's something there to eat them. Sometimes there's enough bait there that you can't even mark the fish that you're looking for. And like this past week with them laying in the mud, when I went down there a week before and I was scanning stuff, I didn't mark hardly any fish. And when we came back, a few days later, and we're catching fish that are completely covered in mud, it explains why I wasn't marking anything on side scan or anywhere. It's because they were holding so tight to the mud that you just don't even see them. So, and that's where I feel like a lot of times keying in on bait and then just trying to fish it. If if you give it a little bit of time and it doesn't, nothing, you don't have any activity. Um, but if everything you think looks right and you're just not seeing them, it doesn't mean they're not there. Um, I can count on one hand how many times I have marked a big fish and pulled back over the top of him and caught him. And that is no joke. I count on
Yeah.
one hand. That's it. Um,
Yeah, that can be tough.
so yeah, I don't know why. I I mean I mark big fish and I turn around and I go up and fish them, and it seems like those ones don't ever want to eat. um, uh, but just bait and like on the Ozarks, schools of fish. And when your schools or pods, what I was looking for out there was not what I would consider a pod. I was looking for schools of fish. I was looking for an area that had a ton of fish, like a pod. You were saying pod earlier. I'd say, anything from 3 to a dozen fish, or maybe even 15 fish might be a pod, where you see those fish that are traveling together, so to speak. And then, like where we were fishing at this weekend, when we pulled in there, both sides, and I was scanning out, 60 to 90 feet. I had changed it a couple times, but it was literally fish close to the bottom, side to side. I mean, as far as you could see on there.
So do you know, how
Um,
do you know that they're catfish? Like, is there something that you've just learned? Do they have a special, like you can maybe see the hump or the belly? Like, what makes you know those are blue cats or catfish?
well, John, if he's watching still, John's gonna give me crap because catfish doing
Uh-oh.
catfish things. um, they do sit with their not if they're just hanging out. I mean, a catfish, blue cat hangs in the water with his head up in the air. I mean, you can see it in the Bass Pro, or go to Bass Pro, or I was going to say Cabela's, but it's not a thing anymore. And look in their aquariums and look what the fish do, because those fish. I mean, that's the best way to explain it. Look what those fish do. Because you can see them from the side right there. So if you can see them from the side right there, when you go look on your side scan and you see a fish that's doing the exact same thing as what you're seeing him do in that aquarium, he's probably a blue cat.
Yeah, that's
And then,
so. And you're using a hummingbird.
yeah, for now,
What does that mean for now?
I'm thinking about switching to Garmin.
So I had
I love my hummingbird though.
you have that. It's just like the Chevy Dodge Ford deal. You know what I mean? So I had
Yeah,
Lowrance APS 12s for on my last boat for 3 years, and I really loved everything about them. You know, the mapping, the 2D. Really, I'm using 2D, side scan, and mapping are my main three things. But one thing I noticed, like on my 2D, the difference between 2D on Lowrance, and I don't know if anybody kind of knows this or agrees with me, and my Garmin are the Lowrance like when it shows fish on 2D, they look like giants. But on my Garmin, they don't look like giants. So it's tough, like for me, especially when I just got my Garmin this year.
to learn
I
it.
was like, yeah, like are these good fish? You know what I mean? Down in MRM, I'd found a really nice pot of fish on an outside bend, and to me, they didn't match what my Lowrance was. So I'm like, what are these fish at 60, 70 foot of water? They're like all over. They're on side scan. They look good, but they're not like these giant puffs on my Lowrance. And we put some baits down, fish. I'm like, okay. So I starting to learn my Garmin, and like I said, now I really love it. But as long, back to what Goebel was saying, and a lot of people, is confidence is key. Whether you're using chicken, a Lowrance, what rod, what hook, as long as you know, and that's what you believe in, that's what matters. But when
My
it and the guy that asked earlier, I mean, you just got to be confident and go out and put in the time. Don't go out and go straight to your fishing spot and throw your rods in. Go leave your rods in the truck and just go scan, and then you can learn a lot from doing that.
Oh, tons. And like, so I'm running, my Humminbirds are Onyxes, so they're kind of old now. And Humminbird doesn't even, they haven't worked on them for 2 or 3 years now. They don't even work on them. They're that old now. And actually had to take one of mine apart to put
Oh
parts
my!
in another one. The card reader went bad and I needed to upgrade it. So I had to take the whole unit apart and put the card reader from one into another one. And so I could update it, but they don't do any more updates on it anymore. And the only thing that if I go Garmin, I really want to go full Garmin and get the trolling motor and everything. But man, I love my auto deploy on my Ulterra. That is just the bee's knees, man.
I can't. I mean, I remember, and you know how long that's been out? I remember the video. I actually looked it up, and I think on my ProCat 240 that I got in 2015, I think that's like the 2016 is when I got that Ulterra. And so many times, like, when I get off work or I'm by myself a lot, like I trust myself I always turn it on, do a quick trial on the trailer right before I put it in, and then I throw it in the water, crank it, and it's always done well for me. Every mess up that I did on that trolling motor was my fault. A back eddy on the Missouri River, it's pushing me up, and I haven't lifted my trolling motor up, and midway I run into the dike or a telephone pole and mess it up. But it's always been my fault. But it's going to be tough for me because I'm going to transition to probably either a power pole or Garmin to not have that auto deploy. I agree 100%, especially when you're bumping, when you're running and gunning. Like, I don't even know what it feels like to go to the front of the boat.
The boat's not even stopped moving, and my trolling motor's on its way up, starting to come down because I'm ready to go fish right now. And I don't have to go to the front of the boat.
Yeah. So that is a game changer. So I mean, like I said, that's going to be a struggle for me. I would assume, and I don't know a lot about the patents and all that, but I would assume some of these other trolling motor companies are probably, maybe when that patent's up, if there is a patent, they'll probably be doing some auto deploy stuff.
Right. And I've been trying to like hold out as long as I could, especially now that there's brushless trolling motors, because I want one like really, really bad. And like we were talking about with mine being the first model with spot lock, and my GPS is so bad, my boat moves so much. I just want to upgrade for that reason alone. And
100%. There was a spot that the Mississippi or the Missouri River Catfish Classic. I was in my boat and I have the old Ulterra, and Rusty Moorfield has a Dynasty 2.0. So same boat, same weight, all that. And he has the power pole, and he can actually go upriver. And when I spot lock in a spot, my boat's all over the place. So just to have that extra power in that, they got better GPS now and all these new ones. I mean, I think that's a game changer, because when you're, like you said, when you want to really target a fish and you can really sit right on top of them or right in front of them, and your trolling motor's not going to go 10 feet this way and 10 feet that way and spinning your boat around, that matters big time.
Yeah. Well, and see, like mine doesn't, the newer Ulterras do them, but mine doesn't. You can just you hit it, and the Tarovas do it too. I mean, like all the newer ones do it. You can bump it, like it'll go 5 feet, whichever direction you want it to go when you're on spot lock. And I think that could be a game changer too, because a lot of times, especially on windy days or windy days when you're not in current, and then on days when you are in current, you can pull up to a spot and you think, this is where I want to be. You're scanning, and it say you're on a lake, so it's windy, and the way it blows your boat after you actually stop, it's not positioned the way you want to be positioned. You can just be like, oh, I'm going to scoot over 5 feet, and it will literally just scoot you over to the right 5 feet or forward 5 feet. That, especially like if you were suspending baits, I think that would be an absolute game changer.
Oh yeah. And I know, like, so the Garmin GPS, which I was out with Matt Looney, and he's a big bass guy that's been using them, so he really knows them, and did some schooling stuff with them. But he was showing, we were at Grand Lake, and he said, watch this, and he put like a spot like that by the boat ramp, and he clicked it, and then it came up where it said navigate to, and then it gave you three options, like the safest path and the quickest path, and you click it, and it's like Google Maps, and it draws a line on your chart, and then once you take off, if you're going, it has like your miles per hour. If you're going 32 miles an hour, 32.32, you're going to be at your destination at 4:13 p.m. at this speed. I mean, it is like crazy. So like,
Wow.
especially tournament fishing, that's cool, or especially if you're running in the dark. So it goes around, like, Grand has a couple islands, so it has to take you around the islands and stuff like that. So I thought that was super cool, just for knowing when you're fishing a tournament, even like how far you're away, how many miles. So I've learned like that's a cool feature. And then if you click a spot you want to go, which I don't have mine linked, but PowerPole and Garmin now link to both. PowerPole and Garmin will link to the GPS. So I can't even imagine now I can click my spot and it's going to take you right there. So, as more products come out that get better, I mean, you can really target these fish.
Oh yeah.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's what I mean, my trolling motor's old enough and has enough hours on it that it needs to become a backup trolling motor is what needs to happen to it.
Yeah.
And that's why I can't figure out, if I go Garmin, then I want to go Garmin because I want my trolling motor to link to my sonar. Right now, I don't have mine linked to my sonar because I don't really scan off of it, and that's really the only thing I can do on that original model. So I know, like John, I've been in his boat when he's used his trolling motor, or when we bumped and he's using his trolling motor, and he can sit there and just on his big screen, it's right in front of him, rather than trying to fiddle around and find his remote, he can just go like that and bump the trolling motor up a little bit, or scoot it to the left or scoot it to the right just by touching the screen. I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I was with Kirby Ham. He's big crappie guy out in Kansas, actually. And I already forgot the lake he took me to, but he's got a ProCat 200 and he loves crappie fishing with it. So he was at the Garmin factory like 2 weeks ago, and he was working with PowerPole and Garmin. They were that monster network that like connects everything together. They've got it linked now where when you set it all up, like when you go to take off at a certain speed, your power poles know to lift up, because a lot of times you might go without them lifted up. And then like when you deploy your trolling motor, and if you got paddles, it'll drop them a certain, like there's a lot of features now in some of this new products that is pretty cool, to have. And it, again, from pinpointing those fish is a big deal. And just like Jake Nally just said, I think linking them all now is Bluetooth, because you got the NEMA network and you got all that stuff. NEMA is kind of a pain because you got to have power to the NEMA and then split it all over the run. So Bluetooth, if that's true, Jake, you're saying that I can Bluetooth my Garmin trolling motor to my GPS units, instead of running 35 cords up there. I mean, that's going to be a game changer.
Does that mean that I could put a 16 next to a 12 and you don't have to hook them up. They'll just Bluetooth to each other as well. That's
Yeah, Jake, if you're watching, I mean, I've kind of been working with some of the Garmin guys, and so I've got a 212s on my dash that I'm just, one's the mother unit, and then I just HDMI actually to the other one, and then
okay.
I got a NBT Marine screen that I'm putting on the back of the boat, and all it is you HDMI out. It's just HDMI out to that, and then it gives you the picture, and then it's the micro USB out of that gives you touchscreen. So for 40-50% less money, you can buy an NBT Marine with Garmin GPS units and have a Garmin GPS unit from 16 to 22 inches that's touchscreen on like the back of the boat. So like that's something I'm doing, because I always like having a sonar on the back of the boat just for like, there's so many times you're bumping and you're always turning and your neck is killing you because all day long that's all you're doing. You're wanting to be on that spot. If you're bumping a ledge or bumping into structure, having a graph in front of you is a game changer.
Oh yeah, that's if we're bumping, I have 3 units on my boat. I have one at the back, and then I have an Onyx 10 that's running all my sonar, and then I have 8 right beside it that is maps. And I'd like to. What I want is just a 16 up front and put my maps and everything on that at one time. I don't think I really want a second one up there. If I probably will change my mind, but I'm gonna start with a 16.
Yeah, that's why I went 212s, and I just like 112 is almost strictly maps, and the other 12 is or 112 is side scan, and the other 12 is maybe maps in 2D, and then one on the back is maps in 2D or side scan if it's big enough to make it. But it's just like I said, what you're confident in, what you need, and like if you make life easier fishing, which sometimes the more stuff is the more complicated. I don't know, it can like get to that fish that you're wanting to get to. You know what I mean? If you're for sure spot locking here and you can see it on the graph,
Well, yeah.
especially if you got a trolling motor that can. Now, I was talking to some guys this weekend. They said the new Humminbird trolling motor has a jog back feature. If you're bumping, you can set like a speed, but the problem is, go ahead. If you know,
Well, I know it has
a
drift mode, but I don't really know how that. I haven't figured out how that really works yet.
Well, and again, I think here's my thing to it is I've been so used to for years holding it in my hand, my right hand, I guess, and then my left hand or whatever hand. But you're just so used to it because I think if you set it at a speed, what happens when the current changes? It's like you're always kind of messing with it. You know what I mean? You need to slow the boat up, speed it up. So I think you're still that might help you. It would be cool if you could maybe run backwards on if you could put 6 pins and you got some structure points instead of always looking back, if it knew how to like back bounce to, okay, we hit this structure. Now we're going to move over and hit this structure. Like that would be really cool. That'd be really cool.
That would be, that would make it too easy.
I know, so then you would just scan a bank, and that's what a lot of anglers have done is you scan 6 brush piles or whatever, but you always it's a lot of work to, okay, we're done here. We got to move over 10 yards or move back this way. So they're kind of saying that it will do that, which I'd have to see that to believe it. I think you'll still have to change your miles per hour or your speed. Just, cruise control on drifting backwards would be nice. Yeah.
Right. And then you have different spots though, like where you might get sucked in and into an eddy.
Oh yeah.
And your boat stalls out. Then what?
So I think that, to me, I would rather see a feature where it would back bounce with your guidance to different structures. You know what I mean? Instead of you having to always look. That's why having that graph in the back is key. But like I said, it's, we talked about this years ago, how when will they let us go backwards instead of kind of doing the north heading and stuff like that.
Right.
but that's still cool. And I think just the brushless itself is saving so much now with lithium and brushless. I mean, I used to run a generator with 3 AGMs. Like, you had to start the generator the second the trolling motor went in the water, and it was all day long. You had to listen to your generator and smell the generator just to bump all day in a tournament.
Yep. I went lithiums this year, and it was the greatest thing. My boat is so peaceful now.
Oh, I know.
Now I listen to my radio, and it's not, and it doesn't have. Now I do listen to it loud sometimes, but it doesn't have to be loud anymore. Like, it used to be,
Yeah.
like, if I wanted to hear it, I had to be bumping over the generator or have it thumping over the generator, and then it was really loud.
Yeah. So let me ask, while we're on that, what's your thoughts on music during fishing? I love music. I got a crazy stereo because I just have always been into music. I've been on a wheeler dragging in 10 foot of water at night and had the bass like shaking the water and still catching fish. I think that there's times that might affect it, but what's your thoughts?
Absolutely. Like, if I was going to pull onto a sand flat on the Missouri River in the middle of the night, and I'm going to get up in, 4 or 5 foot of water, I mean, I'm going to probably shut my sonar off. My radio is going to be on, but it's going to be low, fairly low. It's going to be more background music. Um, but I think, especially different bodies of water, like the Ozarks, that's used to having boats coming up and down there all the time.
Yeah.
And then Wheeler got a lot of big boats on there. I'm sure I've honestly haven't been down there yet. I keep saying I'm gonna go. Um, and then, like, the Mississippi River, I think you can make as much noise as you want to out there. I mean, look at all the barges, and I mean, they're constantly surrounded by noise that doesn't affect their life.
True. 100%.
And I think they get used to it, especially we were kind of joking about that this last weekend about, um, in the summertime, do you have fish in the Ozarks that literally follow boats that are playing music? When I lived out in Western Kansas, we had a sand pit where I worked, and down on the dredge there was a big rod in the walkway, and you would walk out there and you'd pick this rod up it was in the railing, and you would slam it down to the bottom of the railing, and that would call up all the catfish, and we would feed the catfish off that barge while it was running and pumping sand, and they wouldn't come up all day long. You hit that thing 3 or 4 times, they'd come up and feed. On the Ozarks, how many fish follow around picking up sandwiches and hot dogs and stuff that get dropped? Like, they just know, like, if I follow this for a little while, I'll probably get something to eat. Like,
Well, how many restaurants are on the Lake of the Ozarks? I mean, there's
oh,
probably
yeah.
at least 50, and every one of them have dog food that you can buy. And we were just there a couple months ago at Redheads, and you could buy dog food, throw it out, and you could almost grab them. I mean, I remember when I
Yeah.
was little going there, we would be at the, I don't know if I should say this out loud, but my parents took me to Party Cove. And my big thing, like when I was little, is I would try to grab one. Like, we'd put chips in the water. They would come up and you could almost grab them with your hand. You know what I mean? So are they really that scared of noise? If they're in Party Cove, I don't think they're scared of anything. You know?
No. And same with, like, the restaurants you're talking about. Everybody that's pulling up there's got their radio going, and obviously their gas motors are running, and you got exhaust dumping in the water, you know, making all sorts of noise, and they're still all hanging out there ready to eat.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
they
that's true. But I
I
think that,
think
like you
they
said, that they're used to that, at the lake. And then and I always ask every angler, you're on the Missouri River and you're going into a big dike and it's real calm. There's no wind. There's no noise. Are you putting your trolling motor down and going in, or big motor? Because everybody's different. I've been with people that big motor all the way up there and we still catch fish, or I always drop my trolling motor and shut my big motor off because you think that it's so peaceful in there, and now you're disrupting everything.
So I still do it, even though, so I had a 225 Yamaha 2-stroke that was loud. I mean, it sounded like a race car. Cammed out, just blah, 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 blah. And
Yeah.
so I got in the habit of if I was going to fish sand on the Missouri River and I was fishing shallow sand, I pull in at the dike above where I wanted to fish and I put the troll motor in and I get myself in position where I want to be. And then I get out and I would troll myself downriver to where I wanted my partner or me to throw anchor. And I would go ahead and throw anchor. So I pull in there as quiet as I can because every fish I'm actually trying to catch is down river from me. So I didn't want to come in from below them at all. Since I got a 4-stroke, I do pull in a little bit more sometimes straight from the side, but a lot of time, but I always come in high. And then I'll definitely shut my gas motor off, and I still turn the troll motor on if I'm not positioned. Like if I pull in and I stop the boat and we're drifting down, I'm like, man, I need to be over a little farther. We'll use the troll motor and scoot over a little bit farther and get anchor drop as we get closer to where we want to be. I think on sand on the Missouri River, it really makes a difference.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people scare off all sorts of fish. I know I did with my 2-stroke for a long time. Till I started coming in above them, I started catching a lot more fish and a lot bigger fish.
So what about, let's go back when we were talking about noise on rigs. Do you prefer a simple rig, hook, line, leader, or do you go crazy and have hook, float, rattles, demon dragons, all that stuff? What's your thoughts on there? Because a lot of people are, and again, it's the Ford, Chevy, Dodge thing. I mean, everybody is, I've been using some Livingston lures and they actually make noise when they hit the water and do a little glow or whatever. And I did really well last fall on like a specific one. Could it be a coincidence? Absolutely. But, an angler or a fisherman always wants anything that helps. So
level up.
Sometimes you never know. Is it just the bait? What's your thoughts on rattles and all that stuff?
I used to run rattles constantly. I started off taking, if you take a Mr. Crappie Bobber, the green and yellow Mr. Crappie Bobber, and you cut the wire in it and pull the spring out, you can run your line through there. And I would put that in front of my 3-inch float. And I caught a lot of fish doing that. I definitely feel at times it helped me a lot. But where I did it, there was a lot of people that starting to use rattles and stuff, and that place kind of got overfished. And I feel like out there now, a simple rig catches just as many or more fish, and I don't know. Bumping, I know a lot of guys that'll bump with the rattle on their rig. I don't ever. Because I think I'm just more on the simple side, and I don't like losing more gear. So
Well, especially if if you got rattles and stuff like that, you can have a lot of money in a rig.
heck
You could
yeah.
have 10,
So
15 bucks in a rig if you lose it. From the weight and everything.
um,
Especially if you're fishing the structure like you do.
right, and you're fishing a river, you're fishing in current. I run 3-way barrel swivel with a dropper. My dropper is always lighter, so my main leader, say we're bumping, is going to be 60. My dropper for my weight's going to be 30 or 40. Because when that thing gets hung up, I want to be able to break that fast. if it gets hung up that bad that it's not going to come back to me. If it's not going to come back to me with 40-pound test, it's not going to come back to me with 60 probably. So if I can break that off easier, but so between the three-way barrel swivel and the hook, I have a ball chain swivel as well. I think a lot of guys run rigs like that, and that's where your bait can sit back there and spin and spin and spin, and the ball chain swivel in the middle can keep up, because your three-way barrel swivel will never keep up with a bait that's really, really tumbling back there. You know, reeling your line's all twisted and tangled up. Obviously on the lake, it's not that big of a deal, and never seem to have a big problem when we're pulling boards to where you need to put a ball chain swivel in there. But
What about crimping? Are you tying knots or crimping or?
I went to crimping this last year.
Oh, okay. Another one joins.
Yeah, I love it. What are you doing?
Crimping. So I just probably now 2 years ago, Wade Kaminsky and Jake Hockey, I was fishing with them guys quite a bit, and they were into crimping. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to crimp, because like that's just not going to work. When you look at it, it doesn't look like it makes sense. You know what I mean? Like it's got to pull through, or it puts too much pressure on the line. So Jake was at my house, and he made a couple rigs, went out in the garage and put gloves on, and we were pulling on them and breaking swivels, and it never broke at the crimp. So I started learning that. We did a big video on crimping and how to crimp and all that. And like when Wade and Jake get into something, they're 110%. They're going to do the research and find out all about it. And so everything they had, I bought. I bought the Jinko crimper, the High Seas crimps. And like they had, when them guys do something, like I said, they're 110% in it. And Jake has screws and boards where he knows exactly when he wraps around on his leader, like I cut here. And it's just perfect. But after seeing that, like I went to that, and I would say a majority of people, if they haven't gone to it yet, they will, because to me, it makes your, like when you're done, it looks like a factory made your rig. Like you don't have that line memory. When you tie a knot on 80 or 60-pound mono, you always have that funky line memory, and you don't have it with this at all.
No, and my hands feel better.
Yes.
But instead of crimpers, tying knots and pulling on them and pulling them tight, especially with like 80-pound for your anchor leaders, pulling 80-pound line tight and trying to make the knot actually cinch up the way it's supposed to cinch up, wears your fingers out.
Yeah.
If you go tie, because you're going to go do a big tournament and you're going to be down there for a couple days, so you want to tie all these rigs before you go so you can go down and fish and enjoy yourself. You tie all this up, the night before you leave or a couple nights before you leave, and you try to get all of them tied up in one night, and you sit there and tie all those knots, and it's my hands hurt the end of it. Maybe.
Oh yeah, you always get, like I always get one on my pinky when I'm pulling, like it always cuts. Like I don't know, just everything about it, and I think it makes your rig stronger because you don't have that line memory where you pulled tight. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, definitely. I've had a couple break right at the crimp on snags, but I think that was operator error, is what I think that was.
I have not yet. Like I said, what crimps do you use?
I don't know. I get them off of Amazon, just cheap ones.
So I know, like when Wade was doing, they were buying a bunch of different brands, and I don't know how he just came across that, High Seas with the Jinko was 10x better than an off-brand crimp with it, like everything had to kind of fit together, especially when you're using 80-pound mono. Like even Andy's 80-pound mono compared to a different brand is a different thickness, and all that plays a factor. And I mean, that's a lot to really. I've always used 80-pound Andy's Monster, and that's what I think they used at the time. And they just did a bunch of tests on it, and that's what they came up with.
Does High Seas have a marlin on their picture? I feel like
I think so.
Something Seas is what I use. It's got marlin in their logo. Yeah, I mean, you talk about the monofilament, different sizes. My favorite monofilament, still to this day, and I can't get it anywhere around here, is Eagle Claw. I don't
Really?
have it. I've been out of it forever. Walmarts around here used to have, all the Walmarts around here used to have, and Kmart too, when we were growing up, always had Eagle Claw. You could buy it all the way up to like 100-pound test monofilament. And they quit selling it. And so I went to Andy's last year because I finally ran out. I had a bunch of it, and I finally ran out, and I couldn't buy it anymore. It's tough. I mean, for people
what
that are
Andes do you
new,
use?
huh?
Which Andes do you use?
I couldn't tell you that either.
I
I
mean,
haven't
is it
used
Andy?
it.
Is it Monster?
It's got a white label on it. Does that help you
Yeah.
out?
So like I just bought some new stuff this or last fall. I bought the 80. I always did the Monster, I think, because I know Schneiderhan used it. There's a bunch of guys in St. Louis when I kind of got into that, following what they were doing. And I just recently bought, so I've always used the blue Monster. So I thought, well, green's cool. So I'll buy the green 80 Monster. And there, I don't know, maybe it's just the batch I got or it's in my head. But I mean, if anybody wants the 80-pound green Monster, which is kind of expensive, I'm not even going to use it because I broke a few of them. And I've not, like, I can even tell a difference between the two of them. Like there's just something different between the blue and the green. And I know there's not supposed to be, maybe, but it's enough in my head where I'm using 80 blue Monster Andes, period.
Losing a fish due to tackle failure is the absolute worst feeling. when you feel like you could have prevented it. I've tried like the Berkeley fluorocarbon leader. There comes in this rounds. I mean, it's a fairly round spool, but it only comes with like, what is it, like 150 yards or something like that, or 100
Yeah.
yards.
Like
It's not very
I
long.
think they call it leader line.
Yeah, I think they do. I do not like that stuff. I know a few people. I'm not going to throw names out there. I know one guy that really tried to get me to turn on to it, and I could not. Every time that I used it, I'm breaking when I didn't feel like it should have been breaking. And so I got away from that stuff. Power Pro has always treated me good though for your main line. I've never had a problem with anything Power Pro.
Yeah, that's the Andes that I use, the Andes Monster 80.
Okay. I wish my
And then I use
today.
I use Power Pro braid, and again, it goes back to being confident. And I've tried. I think there was Cast King when they came out with braid, or another off brand on Amazon. I thought, well, man, this Power Pro is expensive, and I've got Dakotas, so you're putting like 300 yards on, even though you probably don't use half of it, but to get a bunch of that is expensive. So I got some off-brand stuff, and like just the color that came off, like every time I went to cast, like my thumb is yellow or blue.
Yeah.
So then I went back to Power Pro again, and again, like for me to switch is going to be tough because I'm so confident in Power Pro. I'm so confident in Andy's. I'm so confident in what I use. You know what I mean? So it's always fun at tournaments, like listening to this angler's going to only use this or this because, you know, Kirk Lucky's going to use chicken a lot because he's confident in it. You know, and that's important.
When you talk about like the cost of the line, if you don't lose a ton of it, a lot of times, I mean, almost every year, I'll take a reel and I reel it off of another reel, and all that fresh line that's in the bottom half is now on the
Yep.
outside half where I'm actually fishing 99.9% of the time, and it's all fresh out there. And now I will look over, you know, as I'm pulling off line, I'm not going to throw some chopped up line down in the bottom of that, because say you're about to get spooled out there on the, you're not going to probably get spooled on the lake, but if you're going to get spooled on the river, you're going to want good line in there. I mean, something that's not all chopped up. If it's got a little sun fade, I mean, that's probably going to be fine. But, you know, if you're already at the point where you're about to get spooled, I feel like you might have worse problems on your hand when you think about getting fishing.
So what's your bumping reel that you use?
I use the newer Dakota LC.
500 or 600?
500.
500.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's got plenty of line on it. Yeah, if you're running that out of line, then something crazy happened.
Oh yeah, tons of line on it. And then I've got the older Dakota LCs as well, and I love them. But they're way more durable than the new ones, and I think that all in all, they're a better reel. But the new one with a higher gear ratio is really, really awesome when you want to catch back up. You know, if you get snagged up, I mean, you're there like that to pull it out. And I feel like I get out and around brush and through brush a little bit better sometimes because of that. Because you can just be right on top of it. I wouldn't use them for an anchor rod. I have one, a 600, of the newer ones that I put on an anchor rod, and it's at River Rats right now getting repaired. It didn't make it through a whole season.
Yeah, I just actually went to I talked to River Rats. I got to send him some stuff, but he kind of talked me into Calcuttas, and I bought some Calcuttas from Justin Thornton 2 years ago. He had those Calcutta 400Bs, and then I sent them in and got them kind of amped up a little bit. And I love them like for anchor fishing, and I use them for bumping a little bit. But I kind of got stuck on the Komodo 400, and it's got crazy line retrieval too. But again, actually, I got a snag stick here. If you get hung up with that, you don't want to, because you can get lazy and wrap your line around your reel. Well, you don't want to do that on a Komodo. A Dakota, you can, but it's going to bite you in the butt one day, because doing that and then getting a little, line fray on your reel, or that's hard on your reel when you're wrapping your reel, you know what I mean? Putting all that pressure on it too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, I love those Calcuttas for anchor. So I think I'm going to go to the Calcutta 400Bs for my anchor, because you can cast them and they're really quality reels. And then, for dragging, everybody has to have the old ones. So like the old ones are like gold on the Dakotas, so I've got some old Dakota 600s. I wish I would have never sold my old Dakota 600 line counters. So I don't know. I've always had the same reels and never, more people are kind of getting a set for dragging, a set for anchoring. I'm trying to get to that, but all that stuff costs a lot of money. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. I just bought 3 regular 500s on rods, just 2 months ago, and because I didn't have any and I wanted them, but like you said, they're expensive, and you get on eBay and they're expensive on eBay. I mean, you'll sometimes, if they don't have a buy now at a certain price, they'll go over $300 now for a used, beat up, ugly reel that you need to send off to river rats and have them go through it.
Yeah, I know. I've been looking on Facebook for these 400 Bs. I found one because it's a lot of the walleye guys. They must have bought a crap ton of them, but I found a guy in California that had a 400B and it was in pretty good shape, and it was like, I think 120, which is like a steal because I think that's $250 reel. And then I got one in Minnesota, so I got two, and the two I had bought from Justin Thornton. So I've got 4 anchor reels. But then again, I think it's just one of those things, what you believe in. I went out with Lance Ludke and Dominic Pellegrino on Kerr, and Lance had the PC Fun. I think that's how you pronounce it. That's a cheap reel. I'm talking super cheap. Like you can probably get them for $70. So in your mind, you're thinking, well, I'm paying $200 for a Dakota or a Calcutta. Like there's no way they compare to a $70 PC Fun reel. And like I was casting that reel, and he's a guide and he's guiding every day and he loves them. So like, do you try some of those? Like, so actually a buddy, Nate Moore, just bought some and he was using them today. And he's like, dude, I love these for the price. Like, that's crazy. I mean, you could almost throw them away at the end of the year and you could buy 2 or 3 compared to one Dakota.
I was checking them out. I just don't like the line capacity on it, and I want them to make one size bigger, and I'll buy one because I really want to try it.
I think they will. I
think
think that Lance maybe was working with them, and I think we'll see that them get into that.
I have their reels on my ultralights, and I love them. I mean, I've ice fished with them. I've done a lot of bait fishing with them. I've crappie fished with them. I mean, I've put them through the ringer pretty good, and they seem to be holding up just as good as anything else. So when they get to a bigger spool on there, I'm gonna get one because
And you're not talking about on the ramp. So this actually Nate sent me. This is the ones that he just got.
No, I'm talking on that low pro for bumping.
Yeah, so and he's pretty impressed with those. But yeah, the low pro, that's what Lance Ludke had, and I was shocked. Like you could launch them. They had good line retrieval, good power. But again, you want that if you're on the Mississippi River, you want that extra line capacity just in case, a giant comes along and,
or even things happen. Like even, when I've never used one of those, your snag deals. I'd look at those. I should get one. But I've never used one. Have you ever cut your line on that? Like had your line cut your line and had it break right there at that? Because it happens it happens with just about everything else. So I'm not trying to dog on it.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
So when Doug did this, because usually I used to have like a dowel rod. So his reason is because when you go around, if the line goes over itself a couple times, like you usually do to pull, then that's where like it'll cut.
Right.
So that's why like on this, you go around these grooves that are kind of angled down. So you wrap around there so it doesn't wrap over each other. And then you just pull, it goes right through the first groove and you just pull. Now you can cut it if you just pull straight through.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not holding it like a T-bar like you would have with a dowel rod.
No. Because the goal is that you don't wrap your line around each other. You know what I mean? Like
right.
I've done that on my Dakota where I've wrapped a bunch of times around the reel and then pull and then it break right at the reel. And then I do it and then it doesn't break. And I'm like, it's going to cost me to fish one of these days because I keep doing it.
Right.
Well,
and that's, when you lose a bunch of line like that, that's why I like my line capacity, because every now and then if you have something happens and you lose a bunch of line, you're in the middle of a tournament or something, you don't have to grab another reel or even another rod if you're feeling comfortable with what you've got in your hand. All you gotta do is retie because you just lost 150 feet of line, but guess what? I have every bit that I need to finish this tournament or finish
Yeah.
fishing, even just fun fishing. You don't have to call it a day.
Yeah. No, 100%. What so do you usually have a bunch of rigs pre-tied up then?
Oh yeah, a
You
lot.
make sure you go to the tournament and you're ready to rock. You got 40 tied up or plenty tied up just so you don't have to, because I've seen some anglers they got to go in early to tie rigs and they didn't bring any rigs, and
I
Nate or
tried.
Donald Moore is pretty notorious of that.
I used to be where like I would show up, and this year, honestly, because we had fished St. Joe, and then we fished uh, the Atchison tournament, and then we went down to the MRM and Helena, and it was all so close together, and with work, and I go, I've been elk hunting every year. I have all these things going on, and when we went down there, I had to tie to MRM. I had to tie rigs in the hotel down there, which I hadn't done in a while because I've been doing really good at trying to keep. I mean, if I'm just going for a day during a tournament, I want to have at least 15 to 20 bumping rigs in the boat just in case. I mean, I'm
Now,
hoping that I go.
do your bumping rigs stay the same, or do you have like two different styles, or are you always like I've got to have a 15-inch bumping rig and 6 inches from the hook I'm going to go to the swivel, or like are you just like I'm just gonna tie them and go as fast as I can, or do you have a
I
system?
just, I kind of got a little bit of a system, but I tie them, just fast as I can go. And I mean, I don't normally do like super, super long leaders. Um, I used to do long leaders for anchor fishing. And if you saw that comment earlier about John calling me the bird's nest king, I used to
Yes, I
tie
did see
long.
that.
I used to tie long, long leaders, and I felt like I needed a really long leader, and a long leader is way harder to cast than a short
Oh
leader.
yeah.
And I'd zing one. I could zing them out there, but every now and then I'd bird's nest. And him and Joel used to make fun of me. And Joel's the one that started it. Joel started counting them, and so
Oh
he would
my.
count them throughout the day. And I never got to like 20 or anything, but I'd get like six. You know,
Six
be
in a
like,
day? That's rough.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. I finally got smart and started making life easier on myself and tying them a little bit shorter. It's funny all the things that I don't know. I was set in my ways. I was using long leaders, and I seem to be doing really good for a long time. With an Abu Garcia, I would never bird's nest. I just zing them. But with the Dakotas, they don't cast as good as a 7,000 Garcia. They just don't. I don't think.
No, especially if that lever clicks over. I mean, I had Nate Moore, if you're still on here, we were fishing together and he launched one out and it clicked and that thing shot off like a rocket. I mean, rod and the whole thing went in there. That was worse than a bird's nest.
Hands must have been a little slick from baiting up.
I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so
I've,
but yeah, I know there's always that, that little thing, but as long as you're confident, from if you got a long leader, short leader, and like I said, go all the way to Jake and Wade, how every rig they have is going to be precise, exactly the same length. I mean, they've got it dialed down to whether that's a 10-inch leader or whatever, but it's all the same. And then you got anglers that are just at night, they're outside in the dark and they're just, that looks good, cutting here, cutting there.
I think um, I think a catfish is a giant taste bud. I mean, we know he is. He's got taste buds from his head to his tail, all the way down the outside of his body. They're on his whiskers. They're in his mouth. They're literally everywhere. He's a giant swimming taste bud. I think when you start getting like your droppers and all these things, and then you start trying to, I think that it's. I think some people just overthink it a little bit more than I do. I kind of feel like, you know, I've got a bloody, oily bait coming down the river, and you know, obviously, the farther away the fish is, the less he's going to smell it or taste it. So,
Oh yeah.
but when so I'm not saying that you can't draw fish in from forever away, because your scent is spreading out. Um, but I think as long as you're within 2 feet of the bottom, especially bumping, and on the Missouri River where they're not so much up in the water column as they are on the Mississippi. Not saying they're not in the water column, because they most definitely are. Look at all the guys that do amazing off of jug lines and stuff. I mean, they're all over the water column. But where do we target them? We target them on the bottom.
Hmm.
And so,
When you think of really the water column is going to be more your active fish. I mean,
right.
do you ever dead stick and have something in the water column?
Yeah, we've never caught a fish in the Missouri River doing it. Like, while we're bumping, I have Brunswick tournament. Oh man, this was a KC Cats tournament. The river was complete trash, and I went out and drove upriver and drove to where I thought was a good place to start, and I free drifted the Missouri River all night, and I think I got fifth place that night out of 100 and some boats. And we just free drifted all night in the middle of the river. I had baits at the bottom, baits up high, a little higher, and we did really good. I've caught a lot of fish free drifting on Missouri, and a few on the Mississippi. I haven't done it as much on the Mississippi.
Now, when you say free drifting, kind of explain that.
So I try to keep my boat. So I put rods off. Let's start there. I put rods off the front of the boat, two of them, one on each side of the trolling motor, pointed out, then two off the back, doing the same thing, and then in the middle of the boat, two going straight out and down. And then I try to keep my boat going down the river sideways with my trolling motor. My trolling motor's off 99% of the time, but I bump it, just kick it on just to spin the boat just a little bit. And then I'm just floating at current speed and try to keep my baits pretty close to the bottom for the most part. And I'll have one or two that's up in the air. And I've caught a lot of fish doing that, a ton of fish. I don't do it very much because I don't catch very many big fish doing it. But if you know, that's one of my little secrets for you need a fifth fish. That's
That's what
one of my
Joel
little,
Roberts said. Well, there went that secret.
yeah, no, he hated it.
But so, I know some anglers actually, Michael Stover even has a little contraption that he built where when he's bumping, he'll have a long line, like with kind of like a bobber that he's created to just kind of free float. You know what I mean? Where he knows that if he's not going to get below 16, like 16 foot's the most shallow it'll get, and he won't hang up. You ever do
Right.
anything like that?
And I've done it a few times where most of your jug line guys are catching fish, 3 to 6 feet down. Okay.
Yeah, they do
So
good. Like I've seen those guys do really well.
they kill it. So I have tried it numerous times with no luck whatsoever. And it really drives me nuts because I know it works. It works. The jug line guys prove it all the time. But one time in a tournament, Joel bumped the entire time, and the entire time that he bumped, I had a float rig set up with a big slip bobber, and I was casting it up towards the bank, and I would let it get down and let it float past us because we were going slow. I would let it float past us for however far I felt like trying to fight a fish back in from there. And then I would reel it in and I would cast it up. And because you think all these active fish in the summertime are up in the rocks, why did that not work? But I'd never caught a single fish on it. And I did that all night long. I think in the morning I started bumping again. I think he told me I probably ought to give up on that.
Yeah, I mean, you think that would work with the jug guys doing it?
Right.
You
And
know?
it was a night tournament. So, I mean, what better time? But yeah, I tried it that whole tournament, and I've tried it other times as well. With I haven't had any luck doing it, but could just be one of
I mean,
those
I
things.
know quite a few people. I know that Michael Stover likes to do it, and I think he catches a lot of fish doing it too.
I bet he
Now
does.
he's not going towards shore. I think he's
Right.
kind of just saying that I got a 16-foot bottom, so I'm going to set this bait at 14 foot with this bobber rig, and I'm going to throw it way back and kind of let it follow the seam. So if you're kind of on that seam, that bait's going to kind of go with that seam. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's a good
Now,
idea.
it's a good idea. I probably wouldn't do. I wouldn't do it uh, out on the outside bend. I would do it maybe out in the sand, out in the middle of the river, because you're more. The odds of you hitting a brush pile or something out there
Oh,
on the inside.
you get hung up, and then that's the bad thing
And
is if it
yeah,
hangs up, you got to reel up, and you got a disaster.
right. I
You
I
know.
mean, never never underestimate the fish you catch when you quit bumping and put your rod in the rod holder, because it happens. Um, but I also broke a rod this year, doing that this spring. I was fishing with John, and we were fishing the Lexington tournament. It was me, Kevin, and John, and I put rod in the rod holder, and while we were bumping, and we were like getting ready to move and do something different, and I just, or no, not that time. I set it in a rod holder anyways, and went up to the front of the boat and went to the bathroom. And while I was going to the bathroom, my rod got smoked, caught. I don't remember what the fish was. It was 25 or 30 pounds, 20 something pounds. And so I did that again, and did that with Cody, I think, and caught a fish. Did it again. I did it numerous times this summer and caught fish doing that. And then I did it one time where it got hung up and the rod flipped all the way from the driver's side of the boat to the passenger side of the boat, but stayed in my rod holder, and it broke
Oh wow.
my rod, uh, broke the butt of it. And Craig Burlage fixed it up. Main Lake Rod Works or whatever.
Yeah, he's a good dude.
Uh,
He was on here a little bit ago. I like Craig.
oh, he's awesome. He cracks me up. But he did good work on that rod. He fixed it. I mean, it folded the handle. I couldn't believe it didn't go ahead and break apart. It all stayed stringy, and he fixed it. And I bumped with it for most of the summer. Um, I bought a couple more of the Black Horse custom bumping rods, and I don't think. Well, I can already tell you the eye placement is different on them from the originals. I don't think they're the same rod, but I don't know. I can't without having. I need to be with somebody like Joel that's got an original and bump with it right next to it. But I
Yeah.
think I can. I think I could feel better with my old ones.
So what is and speaking of Craig, which with Main Lake Rod, he makes an awesome rod. He actually I bet him last year. He made a thing where he made a Kansas City Chiefs rod and he'll put your name on it. And if they lose, you don't have to pay for it. If they win, it's like, I don't know, it's a lot of money. But I like the Chiefs are going to lose today, and it was a bad bet on my part. But Rhett, my son, got a nice bumping rod that sits in his room and it doesn't get used. So someday it will. But this is Kansas City Chiefs and Rhett Nagy. But what Craig has been doing, like, what's your thoughts of that? Because I see like he's making a bumping rod. I guess you call it a bumping rod where it's like set for jigging straight down and live scoping. And I've seen some of his videos, and he's catching fish on live scope. Like, do you see that being something that we're going to be like in 2 years? Are people going to be like dead sticking or I guess bumping straight down using live scope? Like, what's your thoughts there? Because Craig definitely doing it.
Somebody's gonna really figure it out. I mean, at some point in time, they've got to. And we've been playing with it a lot at Milford. We've played with it on the Mississippi River a lot, and we have had no luck with it, and we can't figure out why. Like when you're crappie fishing and you watch a crappie come up to your jig and you pull it away from him, and he chases it up, and then he goes ahead and eats it. On the Mississippi River and out at Milford, they chase it up, they turn around, they go back down. We've tried doing all sorts of different things. The only thing that we haven't done that we want to try, honestly, is live bait. I think that might be a game changer. I think those really
that was my next question: is live bait can maybe like that rattle? You know, maybe the live bait's enticing them, not to maybe they're hungry or that they want to, but that strike reaction. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just like maybe when you're bumping and you get close to them, they might not. You know, sometimes you get that where they just mouth it. Maybe they're not hungry, but they just want to kill it like right now.
Right. I think it's a more natural. If you had a live bait on there, it's just more natural that you just have a wounded fish there than a cut up piece of bait. You're obviously, if it's more natural, you should get more natural instinctive bites off of that. Maybe. But we did on the Mississippi River, we ran live scope and watched fish all day long. They come up, swim up, look at the bait, turn around, swim off. They will you drop the bait back down. They will turn around, come back down, be right downriver of it, come up to where they block out your bait, where you think they all but have it in their mouth, and sit there with it. And he'll start to swim away from it. You move it up a little bit, he'll come back up to it and just keep doing that all day long. And we never, ever caught a fish doing it. And I know it's got to work. I just don't know if the fish were off that day, or when we were doing that. On Milford.
It could be, like I said, I think it will change the game. And I think isn't Craig making like some rigs like with weighted hooks or something even?
Oh, I don't know about that. I haven't seen that.
Yeah, maybe I'm not supposed to say that out loud, but
Yeah,
there's some people that are definitely looking into it. But I think again, I got to go crappie fishing with Kirby, and like he's gotten so good at it where he could watch the screen, and I only done it one time, but it was so crazy, like how you can see everything. Until you do it in person, it's hard to understand. But like he would tell me I got one before I even felt it. Like he would watch my bait and watch the fish. And finally, by the end of the day, I kind of understood what was going on, because it is a lot to take in, like what cone you're at. But it's fun. You know what I mean? But I think that you can really get stuck on probably one fish for a long time too.
Yeah, you could. Definitely could. We've used it. We have never gone over and just sat on top of fish and targeted them. We've always been on the move. Like dragging boards. Cody had his live scope out while we were dragging boards, and he had a suspended bait, and we were watching fish come up to it, and they wouldn't hit it. And so he would constantly try different things. He even got to where he put how big the shad can be out at Milford. I mean, you catch, I think he had like a 15 or 16-inch shad on there. And they did the same thing. They come up, look at it. Yeah, that's not really what I wanted to eat today. And they turn around and go away. But I know,
Wow.
like, with the right bait and whatever the right presentation is, it can work. It's just figuring that out.
Yeah, because if you really think about it, how many catfish are coming up eating a cut piece of bait in the middle of the water column?
Right.
I mean, so maybe that's that live bait, and then they just maybe they're coming up to just to strike it, kill it, get it away from me. Maybe having a live bait changes that. You know what I mean?
I'd like to try it on the Mississippi River with some live bait, and one of these times when I go down there, I'm going to try it. I don't care if it's bluegill, just something that swims. I don't care.
Yeah,
I've caught a lot of fish on bluegill.
yeah. Well, it's a hardy fish. I mean, shad and mooneye are kind of tough to keep alive, especially in the Mississippi River and those conditions. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, yeah, and even skipjack. I mean, you kind of need a round tank for them.
Yeah.
Sounds like I haven't really tried, but there for a while, everybody said you 100% had to have a round tank for them. My live well's been, I've kept shad alive in my live well, uh, 60 gallons for a long time, and it's square.
Yeah.
But it can't be real hot, you know.
Well, I think big thing is just rounded corners are best probably for shad so they don't run into the corners. But I think if you can keep fresh water, even oxygen, I mean, even in my dynasty, I've had, that giant live well, I'll just keep fresh water pumping and some oxygen and they'll stay alive for a long time.
Oh
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah, definitely. And that's where you talk about you brought up goldeye a couple times. Rarely ever target them to use them for bait because they just don't. That you talk about a bait that gets mushy. Those things get mushy fast.
I'll never freeze those and use them, but that's my favorite fresh bait.
Really.
Yeah.
And you're not the only one to say that. Like Kyle Kohler, I mean, he goes out of his way to catch them.
Yeah, they're
And
not easy to catch. I mean, not like easy. You only catch shad and stuff like that. I mean, you got your areas, but it's tough to go catch them and keep them alive and drive, 10 hours to Memphis or for a tournament. And then you got to keep them alive for 2 or 3 days. And they get
right.
mushy pretty fast. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I don't know. I just when I've caught fish on them, I've caught fish on them, but then I've used them a lot where I go out and catch them when I get to the river, and I just have not done that great with them. And I don't know, shad or Asian carp or skipjack. I'd probably rather have Asian carp than goldeye or mooneye.
Yeah, and you take Asian carp, and I mean, I've had the studies done with Western Illinois University, and they do the diet samples, and it's like 97% of their diet is Asian carp. But I absolutely hate to use Asian carp. Hate it, hate it, hate it. I never catch any fish. I mean, I never catch anything on it. They're nasty. I just hate it.
It's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite baits. Mississippi River's different. I have tried it down there a few times, and I have not done any good with it down there. And I know guys that do.
But what don't you
Um,
catch them on the Missouri like a better size? Because like in my pool, they're like 30 pounds is like the smallest one you can catch.
yeah, that's fine.
Oh,
But we catch a lot of 8 to 12 pounders, probably 6 to 12, 6 to 15, I guess.
so let me catch you bucket, you catch it, you put it in a bucket and gut it or whatever, let it sit in its own blood and all that too. Or what do you do?
Sometimes I'll cut the tails off and make a huge mess, and get blood everywhere. But cut the
Oh
tails
my.
off and bleed them into a bucket, and then flay them and throw the fillets down in the blood, let them soak for a little while. Or if I'm just out fun fishing and I just caught the bait and I'm just gonna go fishing right now, I mean, I just fillet them, use them the way they are. I like them. Caught a lot of fish off of them.
What was your
But-
biggest? What was your biggest two fish caught off of?
Both of them were shad,
Both of them are shad.
but one of them was a lake fish, and the other one was fall. The one I just caught, the 89, which
Yeah.
we were using fall tactics, so we was using shad. And then, but before that, like my other one, 77, and the other 70s that were caught this year, I mean, they were all on shad or skipjack or carp. I mean, I guess it was really just a mixture. This summer, it's just about anything. I tried some frozen Asian carp this summer that I had soaked in blood, and I did okay on it. It definitely was not my preferred bait to have that frozen and try to reuse that later on.
Yeah.
Um, don't ever. I don't know. I think that they'll eat anything. So,
100%. I agree. 100%.
and that's the thing is here in Kansas, if it's legally caught, you can use it for bait. When it comes to game, like game fish, crappie, you can't use in lakes that have a length limit. You cannot use, like in Hillsdale that's right next to me. I can't use a crappie in there for bait unless I caught it rod and reel and it's over 10 inches, but I can use it. If I catch it legally.
That'd be
Versus
a
I
good
know
bait
like
to catch used then, right?
oh, amazing. You go out to Milford with a crappie rod and catch some crappie, and then go use them. They can be pretty awesome. That's the thing. Our bait laws are a lot more lenient than Missouri. I don't know about Illinois.
You can do
But
about
we
anything you
can-
want in Illinois, honestly.
Really?
Unfortunately. Yeah.
You say unfortunately. I
Yeah,
wish.
I mean we're working on that, but yeah, I mean it's yeah. I mean you still gotta
Missouri's
have a
too
fishing
strict.
license, but
Missouri's too strict. Like they want to give you a size limit on your bluegill that you can use. Like what?
Yeah.
Come on. If I catch a bluegill, I should be able to use it anytime I want. That is not a game fish.
that's how it's crazy how each state's different from slot limits to unders, overs, you know what I mean? And that played a huge factor at Lake of the Ozarks where, you know, my goal, if we can get back there next year, is I would love to, because they do this for some bass tournaments and other tournaments where, you know, for just the tournament, there is no slot. Like it's 4 fish or whatever. Because that slot, there was a lot of people that, you know, when you travel and all you catch is slot fish, it's tough, you know?
So, right. Well, so I was thinking about that, and I was going to talk to you about that. I was curious about you did the two. You only do 2 overs during your tournament.
During that tournament, and just because in previous years, I've never, if I had 4 overs at a tournament, that was big. So,
Okay.
you know, and then going kind of by if there was only one angler in the boat, you know what I mean? Anymore,
Right.
it's not I'm not opposed to going to 4 overs, you know what I mean? It's not like they're 4 80-pound fish, but it didn't need to be 4 overs because nobody caught. Rarely, I don't know that anybody ever caught 2 overs. So this time of year is different, and there were a lot of overs caught. I mean, it was a really good weigh-in because your unders are like nothing. I mean, I think a huge under is 8 pounds. I think we've seen some. I don't know that we've seen an 8. I can't remember, but I was trying to measure some of the good ones and kind of remember like that. You know, this was 24.5, but it was 6.5 pounds. So there were some 6s, maybe a few 7s. I don't think 8s, but we did weigh an over that was 16.11. That's a small over. Yeah, I mean, it was just barely over, but it was a really long, skinny fish. So, you know, you always hear like 8 to 22 or 8 to 21 pounds. And a tournament, you can really find out where that line is. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. See, I had one, an over pre-fishing that was 18 pounds. And I was like, wow, I thought that was a small over, you know?
Yeah, I got this one back out of the scale and measured it again, and it was like 30. I think it was, I got it wrote down because I wanted to know, because I was like, wow, this is 16.11. But it was one of those, it was like really skinny, really long, but like had no weight at all. You know what I mean?
That's your good fish.
Yeah. That's a good one.
Well, really, because he hasn't filled out yet.
No.
And so he should turn into a big fish. And that's what I think, if you were catching more long, skinny fish, because you catch all these fish out there and they're a barrel. Okay. How many of those fish that are already a barrel that have already filled out into their body, you know, into what they're going to be? I'm curious. And this is just a thought. And we've talked, me and some other guys have talked about it, that a lot of times we think that those long, skinny fish like that are your fish that are going to turn into really big fish.
Yeah, I mean, you look at these two. I don't know if you can see these two that I pulled up here that you guys caught.
Yeah.
I mean, those are good. I mean, that, like the one that you're holding, that's a big fish.
Yeah.
And he's probably could still gain some weight. I mean, that's what's that, 44?
Yeah. And then the other one was
that's
30.
a really good Lake of the Ozarks fish.
I think the other one was like 32. Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of difference between those two. I mean, that other one is a lot shorter,
and fat,
but kind of thick. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, and see, like I would say that one I caught looks like he could still gain some pounds.
Oh, absolutely.
I think a lot of, because I know like at Lacing Lake out here, it's been years ago, but we caught a low 30s fish that was, I mean, he was so short, and it was just this fat barrel. And I think he had just reached as long as he was going to get, and he just started packing pounds on. And I bet that fish, we let him go. I bet he never got any longer than that, or not much, and probably just got fatter.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, if you see fish there, there's unhealthy fish as well out there. But I think when you see a fish that's actually looks healthy and he's just skinny, and maybe even his belly's full, but he's not overly chunky, I think a lot of those fish are the fish that turn into big fish. The fish we dream about.
That's why, like, I'm, you know, I don't know about you, but this weekend was a really successful event. You know what I mean? I think that it kind of put Lake of the Ozarks on the map, that what it can be. You know what I mean? I mean, obviously you got the Warsaw, which is really a different Lake of the Ozarks tournament in my eyes, but like the bigger end in the winter, that's a fun thing. There's a lot of things to do for families. The Blue Cat Lounge, Alhana, like that's perfect. You know what I mean? For an angler to come and spend time, leave their boat on the water. And there's so much water down there. Like, there's so much water to fish. Like, to me, it's so untapped because just not a lot of people get a chance to fish it, because unless it's winter, you will not fish down there. Maybe at night. I wouldn't fish there at night, actually. So, I mean, you can't fish that lake 8, 9 months of maybe 10 months out of the year.
No.
You know, we've been there in March, we've been there in October, and it's been insane. So, I mean, this is like the perfect time. And I think, like I said, that was a really good weigh in. And if you take what you did and you make it 4 overs, 1 under, look what you would have weighed.
Yeah.
That'd been some big weight.
Heck yeah. And that's why I was curious. I mean, not that you catch a lot of, 40 plus pound fish out of that lake, but when you start stacking in, say you got 430s, 430, 30 to 35 pound fish. I mean, now you're 130 pounds,
Yeah, 100%.
and
So that's what I'd like to see is we'll probably restructure the limit next year. But in the past, you didn't have, like, in my eyes, you didn't need to have 4 overs. You know what I mean? Nobody, I don't, like I said, I'd have to look back, but I don't know that anybody ever had 2 overs. And if they did, they were small. You know?
do you think the slot limit is the reason? Or do you think people are just getting better?
Well, I will say people are getting better, 100%. But I also think it's a time of year. I think that this time of year is better than the October, than the March. You know what I mean? And again, you have so many new. I mean, there was 46 teams, but it was a stacked field. I mean, the guys that are, some of them that spend a lot. You take Joe Lunsford and Jason Smith, spent a lot. I mean, they guide on that lake. They struggled. They were fishing deep 80-foot water and they couldn't get an over. But then you got people that went there and are dragging. I don't know what JT was dragging, or you were fishing 15 to 20. So everybody's fishing so different. And I think everybody's still learning like what this lake is and how to fish it. And I hear I can't get bait. It's 45 feet deep. I can't get my net that low. So, but you're catching bait in 6 to 10, so there's so much to still be to learn. Is bait in the mornings easier to catch in the coves, or do I need to catch the bigger bait deep, or what fish are holding deep because the lake's so deep and stays probably pretty cool. Like, so there's anglers that did good in 80 foot of water that were in the top 10. So it's, you know what I mean? Like, you can fish it so many ways and be in the top 10. That's what's cool. So I think I almost want to go back next weekend and redo the tournament and see what we weigh. Like there's not enough data in just that one day. Like, I feel it was good, but I'd like to hit it again and see, like, because like you said, you had some better days pre-fishing. I know some other anglers that did better pre-fishing. I think John and Kevin did a lot better pre-fishing.
A lot better.
So what could that lake really do? You know what I mean?
Right.
I love Alabama, but I can go to Alabama next weekend and maybe get a bite or two, maybe not catch a fish. You know what I mean? And Lake of the Ozarks, if you don't catch a fish, you probably did something very wrong. Like, your bait was bad, or you didn't have bait on your hook, maybe,
Yeah. If you go down there and get absolutely skunked, you didn't try very hard. I feel like.
Yeah, 100%.
Or your bait's just absolutely terrible.
Something was really bad because that lake is loaded, but I just love it for the fact that you have so many different ways to fish it, from shallow water, deep water, dragging, anchoring, suspended, chicken, shad, bait deep, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of that bait that's deep. Does it hold deep a lot of the times? And those fish follow those schools of bait. So there's so many ways to look at it. And I think, again, we didn't hit it perfectly on the best day of fishing, but in our eyes, it was a great day just because of the weigh-in.
Yeah, no, I mean, we had a great day of fishing. We caught quite a few fish. I think even, you talked about all the different variables. You even have, because of the way the lake is long and skinny, and it is basically a river, that when Truman opens up, and then even this time of the year, if Truman opened up and they had to open up Bagnell, and there was actual current in there, you'd have guys fishing the current, and then you'd still have guys fishing what's basically just exactly like a lake, which it is a lake, but
Yeah.
in the back in the coves and up in different arms and up the gravois. I mean, there wouldn't be any current, so to speak, up there. If Truman and Bagnall were releasing about the same amount of water, it's not going to pull water or push water too much out of the gravois arm or over there by Osage Beach. Um, so that there's just a lot of different ways to fish that lake, and I think I think it I think it humbles people, and it has humbled me in the past, uh,
Yeah.
where I've haven't caught fish where I thought I should catch fish out there, and then I didn't, and then like this weekend, really being able to get on them, that was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Like I'm excited. I never would say that I'm excited to go to Lake of the Ozarks and go fishing. Like now, I want to go and do some fish in the lake because I mean now you're hearing there's a lot of good fish caught. And before at my tournaments, if you had 2 overs, 3 overs out of 70 boats, that's normal. So I think it can be done, and maybe this time of the year is the year to go, or the time of the year to go. So I'm probably gonna go
Yeah,
down there in a couple weeks and mess around.
I I plan on going down there. I want to go down there when they start coming up real shallow. I want to try it. I've never been down there and done good. We've taken some trips. Joel and I have done some wing it deals where we go down there and fish all night and then drive home in the morning. And I don't know why we wanted to fish at night, but we did in the wintertime. And
How was that?
um, when we did it in his Sea Arc, it was much better than the way we used to do it out of his Starcraft. Because he has full enclosure. But
I'd say you're gonna need a full enclosure probably at night in the winter.
we used to not though. Joel and I used to go out and fish the Missouri River when like the ice would be coming headed our way, and we'd be. I remember we went out like December. It was right around Christmas. It was December 20 something, and him and I went out on the Missouri River. The water temperature was 33 degrees, and we fished all night out there, just sitting out there in the cold, no heater.
Hey, that's what it's about though. But once you get an enclosure, or once you start using heaters, it's hard to go backwards
Yeah.
once you get
Oh
used to that
yeah.
comfort.
I can't get Joel to go out on a crappy day. Not in my boat.
Yeah, he's getting too comfort. I mean, he's got to have the heat. He's got to have the
Yeah.
7 sunny inside that enclosure. He's probably wearing shorts and sandals.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh man. Um, I'm looking forward to Alton this year. That's gonna be a good one.
Yeah,
We did we didn't do as good during the tournament as we did pre-fishing this last year, but the river conditions changed drastically overnight, and we just didn't.
and that happens, man. That's
Right.
you just it's and that can really throw things off when you're on a pattern from Donna Moore was on a pattern a week before Lake of the Ozarks. Such a good pattern that they didn't pre-fish. Like they came there Friday morning. I'm driving around the lake at 11 o'clock to go. I don't know, we were going to Menards or something, and they're at the restaurant eating. He's like, we don't need to go out. We got our spot. I'm like, the weather is literally gone like this all week. And then tournament day, they struggled. And, I think that, but as an angler, you ask Donald and Charlie, they learned a big lesson. You know what I mean? That, you know, it's so important to go out that day before as close to the tournament because fish move, things change, weather changes.
Yep. You got to watch. You know, on you got to watch water levels. If it rains, a bunch, and all of a sudden the lake's going to come up or the river's going to come up, couple 2, 3, 4 feet, whatever it may be. That can change. I can change everything just absolutely so fast.
Oh yeah.
And you can push fish or just the sun coming out, especially on the Ozarks. I feel like there's other lakes that are muddier that it wouldn't affect them as much. But I feel like on the Ozarks, the sun coming out affected them a lot more. A
So in
lot
what
more.
ways?
So when we first started out, we pulled into our first spot. We had 5 fish in the live well in the first 30 minutes, and we were already turning fish back. And we had 1 over. But then it died off. As soon as the sun started to come down and hit the water where we were at, our bite just went to almost nothing. And then we moved like 80 yards over, and our bite was very, very slow there. And then we ended up catching our 44-pound fish out of that spot. But then after that, our bite just, it got slow. It got real slow compared to the day before. The day before, I feel like we could have sat there all day and just caught fish all day and never moved and just
So what
hammered.
do you think happened when the sun came up? You're talking like when the sun came up or when it was really penetrating in the water, like around
When
9 o'clock?
around 9 o'clock, when it was really penetrating the water, was when it was
So do you think
really.
it shut the fish off, or what do you think or it moved
I
them
think
somewhere?
I think it moved them because we didn't like even when I went out and scanned over that 20, 15 to 20 foot mud flat. It was There was fish out there, but nowhere near the amount of fish that we saw the day before. Now we didn't get to scan it first thing in the morning because I was running. I should have been there 5 minutes earlier, and I could have scanned it. I still would have fished it. It wouldn't have mattered. But um, it just when we went back out there in the afternoon or after 9 o'clock, those fish were just scattered, few and far between. It was night and day difference from the day before. And we went up shallow, and they weren't there. They didn't move up shallow. And we thought that they might, but I think that's, the water temperature is still in the high 40s, mid to high 40s. I don't think they were really seeking that that warmer water quite yet. I think, that water temperature needs to drop
But
down into the
if you
30s.
notice the live on the water when Brian and Coy and them went to shallow, did you notice that they were almost like 8 degrees colder water?
Really?
Yeah. So
I
like the
didn't.
main lake was a lot warmer than the shallow water,
Which is backwards.
which doesn't make
Should
no sense.
Right? It should have been backwards.
Yeah.
You'd think, shallower water is going to warm up faster with the sun beating on it.
Yeah. But it definitely wasn't the case. So maybe that's why some of them fish weren't as shallow,
Right. Definitely. And then, with Truman putting any water in there, you're pulling off the bottom of the lake, and you typically you think, oh, well, that's going to cool it down. Well, technically, it should. This time of the year, it should have made it warmer because it was colder at night. So your surface temperature is going to be colder than the water down at the bottom of the lake. Then, typically in the summertime, obviously pulling off the bottom of Truman would cool the upper end of the Ozarks. But this time of the year, every time, your nights are longer than your days. So you're definitely getting a lot more cold air cooling the surface temperature
Yeah,
off.
I would love to know what the water temp was like 60 foot down.
Right? That's what.
I mean, it makes you think. Is it warmer? Is it
Right. Well, I mean, you think, what does a basement stay? 60 degrees all year long?
true? And like I said, Brian and Coy, they were in that 8-10 foot of water, and it was 40. I want to say 42 degrees. So.
Man, it's pretty crazy. And that's where I think, when your water temperature actually, when the whole lake gets cold, that's when your coves up there in that shallow water, that's when that actually is warmer. But right now, the lake is still in a cooling effect.
Yeah.
It probably cools off faster up there because there is less water. And so at night, with a long night and it's 27 degrees like it was Friday night, that really cools down, that probably really cools down that back shallow part of the cove. And then
Yeah.
obviously where it's deeper, it's dissipating that cold a lot more. At least it makes sense.
That does make sense.
Makes
Well, we're
sense.
just gonna have to go try it. We're gonna have to go try it sometime then.
Yeah. Heck yeah. I'm gonna get a thermometer and drop it
That
down.
that's actually what I was thinking. Is I'm gonna figure that out, but I am just curious what it is 60 foot down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Maybe it's something crazy. Maybe it is 10 degrees warmer. I don't know. I mean, who knows?
With a AquaView camera, does that tell you temperature on those at the same time?
I'm gonna have to find out.
Because like if you're reeling up a thermometer to look at it, you're going to be changing the temperature on that dramatically as you reel it up.
It does say it does water temp.
That would be real time.
Yeah. On-screen digital display of water temperature at camera depth, OSD, water temp. So, although that is that's too expensive for me to find, I got to figure out a cheaper way.
That's an expensive thermometer.
$1,300 thermometer.
Ooh.
I wonder what that would see at Lake of the Ozarks.
Right, it's clear water.
So maybe it would see really good.
Yeah, we were talking about that too. We were talking about how cool would it be to look at all the fish we're scanning. We're actually fishing a clear lake versus what we're used to fishing, which is muddy.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to do some looking into that because I got to figure that out. I'm going to do a little bit of looking. A broken pontoon. I'm not sure what that means, but. So yeah, man, I can't believe we've been on this for over 3 hours, dude. Can you believe that?
Who said, yeah, it's been a long time. Who said broken pontoon?
Jennifer Aaron Sherman said a dock, a broken pontoon.
Well, we found a broken pontoon out there. It was like front to back, and it folded completely and then split.
Really?
And like the railing looked like the railing was the only thing keeping both ends together. Broke both,
wow.
snapped both tunes.
I bet you can see some crazy stuff out there. I know there's some people that dive. Actually, I've got Bill with Robbins Resort. He dives down there, so I'm gonna reach out to him and kind of see what he thinks.
I'll never go down there ever again.
Oh my gosh! Do you remember when River Monsters went to Lake of the Ozarks?
Yeah,
I think that fish came from the Missouri River or something. I don't know if there's truth to that, but that one guy that goes and gets bodies in cars or boats or whatever, he said, "Yeah, I'll never go back down there." So, catfish the size of Volkswagens.
Right. Oh yeah. Every lake has them. It's crazy. And
Every
they're all
lake
the
and every
size.
dam in the river.
Yeah. And they're all the size of a Volkswagen. Nobody ever says anything about being the size of a Fiat or
I know. I don't get it.
I don't either. I have
That
no
the
doubt in
myth
my
that every
mind.
lake.
I have no doubt in my mind that guys that dive see big fish. I just think that, you know, they just for some reason feel the need to embellish it quite a bit.
Yeah, but when you're diving and it's really dark, I'm trying to picture
Oh yeah.
100-pound fish next to your face would probably scare me to death.
Oh yeah.
That's gonna look giant, probably
Well, he's got a
underwater.
mouth big enough to eat your head.
Yeah, yeah. Drew,
I
you said
know.
let's do it. He's gonna dive down.
And give us a depth or give us a temperature.
Or yeah, see if, yeah, but like I said, I wouldn't want to mess with a flathead or a giant 100-pounder. I mean, they could. I mean, it'd be brutal.
We oh, I'm thinking of. I was thinking of something. Thought already came and went. Um,
But yeah, I'm gonna have to
yeah.
figure that out. I'm gonna reach out to some people and try to figure out the temps at the depth now, and I'm just curious if that can make a change. Why is a shad going deep to get to warmer water?
Oh,
At
it could
certain times of day.
totally.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think it has a lot to do with everything. And then just the sun even like uh okay, think of at a lake, you don't even have to have any structure around and you'll have crappie hanging out underneath the dock. And they're always on the shady side of the dock. They're not in the sun. They're not hardly ever on the sunny side of a dock.
Mm-hmm.
And you go out there and try to catch catfish in 15 foot of water that is very, very clear, there's going to be some sunlight make it down there.
Oh yeah.
I don't, I don't know how far. I know my buddy was a Drew Hill, the um,
He's the one that
diver
just said,
for.
"Look,
Yep, yeah, he's a diver, and for the Navy, and he's talked to me about clarity, water clarity, and local lakes and stuff around here, and he says it's terrible. Drew, if you're still watching this, what's clarity of Ozarks? How deep? How deep can we see daylight? He'll have an answer. He should have a fairly decent answer for that. I know at Hillsdale, right here next to me, is muddy, and I was casting a crankbait, Bagley Fat Cat, and I lost it. And I came home, got my snorkel gear, and I went out there and dropped down, and actually got lucky enough that I dropped down and it was floating right in front of my face. And I was like, "There you are!" And I grabbed it, cut my line, and brought it back up. And I would have never done that, but Bagley went out of business, and that crankbait's about 135 bucks now. So, and I was catching walleye on it, so I wanted it back.
wow, that's wild." Yeah, that's
But
what's
I
cool
knew
about catfishing is there's so many things that to think about, from water clarity and all that stuff, and it can change, how the fish bite. We'll never really know what the catfish are thinking, but so Drew said deepest I've been there is 70 foot, and with a flashlight I could see a few feet. That's pretty good.
Okay. Where did you? But where did you run out of daylight? Like, where did you have to start using a flashlight? At thermocline.
Yeah, start to lose fish at thermocline. But there's not a thermocline now, is there?
No, no, there's nothing right now. It's so it's got, but summertime then, you lose a thermocline. I didn't see one.
No, yeah, that's 70 foot deep to be diving. That was summer, he
Yeah.
said.
Yeah. That's
Did
a
you see
long
any
way.
giant catfish that scared you? What's the craziest thing you've seen at the Lake of the Ozarks then when you're diving? Was that a bad question to ask him?
No.
Well, you know, because you take like Bull Shoals in Norfolk Lake, you know, they'll spearfish catfish.
Right.
It's so clear. So, I mean, they're getting close enough to spear catfish. So, I mean,
Seeing they allow spearfishing down there. I wanted to years ago. I wanted to spearfish Stockton Lake because they've got a rock quarry in there that's really deep. And I figured on those walls there'd be cracks and crevices that would hold flatheads, and I thought it'd be cool to go down there and spearfish a flathead. But it's illegal to spearfish in Missouri, so I never did do it. But there's guys out there. I guess I was talking to a guy the other day. Said that they do it out there all the time at Stockton Lake. I'm sure, guys do it at the Ozarks too.
yeah, there's a lot of videos of Bull Shoals where they do it.
I can't imagine shooting into a hole, or where a fish can't be swimming the other way and then swim at you
Oh,
with a
my.
spear sticking out of his head.
Yeah. They're so powerful, especially underwater.
Right. Like I've been noodling with some people. I've never when I went, I had just dislocated my shoulder, and so I was not about to have this issue there. So I just went along, and and they were talking about, oh man, I can't believe you don't do that. I'm like, well, I've had like, 50 or 60 will beat me up in my boat, and that's my house. I really don't have an inclination to go stick my hand in their house.
No.
I know a lot of
No.
guys that do it, and they
Yeah.
love it.
I'll never do that. I'd end up getting a beaver or a snapping turtle or something crazy. My luck. But it does show you the
Yeah.
power of catfish. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. This last winter, I pulled up to this beaver hole right back behind a dike on the Missouri River, and all of a sudden, this beaver dives out of this hole from way up on the bank. He comes, dives off the hole, and I thought he was coming in the boat. And he hit right below the gunnel and just smoked the side of the boat. Just this big, huge mud smear, and you could see where his head hit the side of the boat.
Oh my god!
I thought I was gonna have a beaver in the boat, just so fast.
I seen a guy at Keystone Lake that guides out there for spoonbill a lot. He had a coyote crawl to his boat or swim to his boat.
Really?
Yeah. Could you imagine that?
That would be nuts. I almost caught a beaver in cast net once. I was in mid throw, and two beavers came out of a hole, and they hit the water right when my net hit the water, and they were moving fast enough they got out from underneath it. But I was like, I was I was about to freak out because I did not want beavers in my cast net.
Well, that cast net would be done if a beaver got in there.
Oh yeah. Yeah. But I couldn't just go off and leave a beaver in there. I'd have to get him out of it. So that'd be a chore.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess Drew's not going to answer us. Hopefully, he will later.
I guess not.
But man,
What
hey,
else?
I appreciate you being on the show tonight and giving some tips and tricks and talking about the Ozarks and bumping and all that fun stuff. And me and you will have to get out together and do some fishing at some point
Sounds
for
good.
sure. So,
Okay. Don't
Like I
threaten me
said,
with a good time.
yeah, and great job this weekend, you and your partner, and I'm sure I'll see you here soon. But again, thanks for being on, and everybody else watching, thanks for watching. This is maybe one of the longest shows we've had, but it's been fun. And again, the goal is to bring you value, to help you out there when you're fishing. And we had a good event. We should have the video done. All the pictures from this weekend are uploaded. It was a great event at Alhana Resort Marina in the Blue Cat Challenge at Lake of the Ozarks. And thanks to Tri-County Lodging and Association for helping bring us there. Our next event is February 3rd at Grove, Oklahoma at Grand Lake of the Cherokees. And then March 2nd at Alton, Illinois. And then March 16th at Kerr Reservoir. So we got a lot of things coming up. Everybody have a good night, and we'll see you next Monday night live. I'm not sure who the guest is yet, but we'll let you know soon. So have a good night. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.